Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 74 of Podcast vs. Enemies, a Destiny Massive Breakdowns show. It is the end of Season 21. The final shape showcase is around the corner, and we're taking a look back at the first half of the Lightfall year. Fellas, we did some stuff in Destiny 2 last week, together, actually, which is, it's been a while since we've been doing that. But, Court, what have you been doing personally, and then what did the three of us get to do this past week in Destiny 2?
Well, just going off my usual ritual for every season, I did do a solo and also flawless Ghost of the Deep dungeon. I wasn't really expecting it to be a solo flawless when I was halfway through the final boss. I was like, oh yeah, I haven't died up to this point, which was completely, I wasn't going for it. It was completely by chance. I was just going in there for the solo just to get that completed. But yeah, got that. Not a big fan of the emblem. I was talking to a few folks today and then a few days ago. It's just, I'm not a big fan of that particular emblem, but I've got it. I've got the Triumph there. It's a little... I'll talk more about Ghost of the Deep in terms of how it kind of scales difficulty and the health pools when we talk about that later on. And yeah, the three of us, we were doing a little bit of Last Wish farming over the weekends, and Impetus and I were also doing some Ghost of the Deep farming. Speaking of which, Impetus, what have you been up to?
Yeah, a lot of farming. So did get my final Red Order weapon from Last Wish. It was Angel Bond, of course. The Void Auto Rifle that I've been waiting for so patiently was the last one that I got unlocked for crafting, but it's here. It's got absolutely zero progress, but I'm not too worried about that because of some changes that we'll be talking about coming next season when it comes to crafting weapons, but it's there, and I'm happy for it. And yeah, we also, Court and myself and Rock DC did some one-phase Ekthar farming for the weapons. I was still chasing a pinnacle helmet for my hunter. My hunter will remain at 1809 heading into the second half of the Lightfall year, which is unfortunate, but I also just haven't been taking advantage of a lot of pinnacle opportunities, so we'll hope to change that. But yeah, that's what we've been up to. I've been up to, and then just doing a little bit of last-minute builds for some of my characters heading into the new season, so Doomfang Pauldrons and Sunbracers. Really happy with the stat splits for both of those. Can't wait to see how those perform next season. How about yourself, Saint?
Still been working on getting the Navigator to drop. Still looking for that guy. So plenty of clears there. We did some farming. Finished up my last weapon from Last Wish, which was Tyranny of Heaven for me. Wasn't really super concerned about the lightweight bow, but got a lot of nice lightweight bow changes on the horizon, so I'm glad to be crafting this thing, working on some fun perks for that, and also went for the solo Ghost of the Deep, solo flawless Ghost of the Deep. Made it about halfway through Ekthar so far. I think I'm probably just going to need to switch up my damage phase on that a little bit. I originally was just using Synthos Bonk Hammer and Tractor Cannon, which is effective, but it can be really annoying if you miss the non-powered melee when he goes to melee you, and you get thrown backwards and your hammer goes flying. You got to go collect the hammer and then re-tractor cannon him and make sure that you're still in the right area so that your synthos will proc. And I was just getting a little bit frustrated at that. So I'm probably going to switch over to Lament for that guy just because of the way the healing works. Court, what were you using for damage phases on your two boss fights? I'm curious.
I was using Lament for Ekthar, and for the final boss, the Witch, I was using, of all the things, considering, LFR's got a knockback, but they are still good when we're talking total damage, damage over time, over a larger period of time, I should say. Cataclysmic with Bait and Switch. So still got that. And yeah, that was for Ekthar, I could have got it down to a 4 phase if I was just being really tight and liberal with my damage buffs and stacking and all that. But I was wanting to keep it quite safe, especially with something like Lament. And for the final boss, it was either a 5 or a 6 phase. I know Impetus asked this before the show started today, but it was something like that. But Yeah, it's certainly not. It's not a sprint. It's definitely a marathon. Like we're talking like a triathlon. There's a lot going on with that dungeon, but yeah, talk about that later.
I don't think I've ever had more damage phases than the first boss, Inspire the Watcher, on the solo. It probably took me 6 phases or something like that, and ever since then, I've just 4 phases. I'm like, that's good. 4 phases is great for a dungeon solo run. 6 is like the standard, which is unfortunate because that is a lot of time running mechanics, man, and it gets a little tedious by the end. But nevertheless, yeah, gonna persist with that. Gonna go back in for that. But let's get into our main episode. We want to thank some people that keep the show on the air, as always, before we get into our main topics, starting with our sponsors, the ones that really keep the lights on in the proverbial Massive Breakdowns studio. A Modern Viking, Askian Monk, Bryce Aroni, Deacon, I'm K. Rose, Moonlight, and This Moment. You can send us all kinds of feedback about the show directly to our socials on Twitter, wherever, or in the Massive Breakdowns Discord server. We've got a PvE channel specifically for talking about the show, going over builds or anything like that we may have mentioned on the show. Positive, critical, constructive feedback always helps the trajectory of the podcast, how we approach and present specific topics, activities, and much more. Also, want to extend a thanks to everybody that supports PvE, just downloading and listening to the show, talking about it, engaging with us each week, telling us we're wrong, telling us we're right, and telling us about things that we may have missed is always very appreciated, and supporting us via Patreon. Speaking of Patreon, if you would like to support the show, please visit DestinyMassiveBreakdowns.com. You can click on the link to Patreon, where you'll get access to a members-only channel in the Discord, the Patrons Lounge, a little behind-the-scenes episode, reviews, previews, and all kinds of things like that. The thumbnails that didn't quite make the cut for the actual episodes and all of that good stuff, and access to an annual merch drop. All right, Court, what are we talking about in our final episode of Season 21?
Can I just say, you do make some banger thumbnails.
Thank you.
There are some really good ones there. Yes, today's show is our last episode of Season 21. There is quite a lot of information to be going through, so we will be a few of these topics will be kind of skimming over, and the rest will be given our kind of comprehensive thoughts. But yeah, starting off with the episode, we've got Joe Blackburn and his little video highlight. Very surprised to see that come out of pretty much nowhere. I think, pretty warranted, considering there's a lot of not great feedback when the state of the game came out. I know we talked about it last week as well. In terms of PvE, it was more of a net positive for us anyway. We've also got the Artifact Perks preview for Season 22. We've also got the Season 22 Weapon Sandbox changes, some highlights there. And of course, we've got our Season 21 review and final thoughts. We'll have timestamps in the description, just if you want to bounce around for those 4 topics. A little bit of housekeeping here, just sort of upcoming scheduling. So Saint and I will be off a few episodes coming up next week. I think, Saint, you said you'll be off. That's the start of the new season. That's episode 75. So Impetus and I will be still here doing our early seasonal impressions. We've got the final shape showcase and everything that pertains to that beyond Destiny 2, Light versus Dark saga, and also just all that kind of jazz related to that. And then I'll be off for 2 weeks. That's episodes 76 and 77. And Saint and Impetus will be covering the seasonal weapons and anything else before we all get back together and do our usual reprise raid for this upcoming season, weapon breakdowns and encounter tips and builds. I'll be listening to the next couple of episodes, or those 2 episodes, from a hot tub.
Beautiful.
Had to put that in there. Just like last year, I am heading back up to the Highlands to a nice little log cabin to spend a few days and nights in a hot tub, and not all the time, but yeah. All right, let's kick us off with the video highlights. I'll just kind of do the first few bullet points here. So Joe Blackburn, he was sort of as a reaction to the state of the game, 2023. He just wanted to put some more kind of context. He's kind of busy with his team getting the final kind of stuff ready for Final Shape, the showcase, everything that's beyond the Final Shape as well. But he did come out with some interesting points here. So he did mention the HUD improvements. So not something that they're going to discuss in the showcase or anytime soon. Joe did confirm that the buffs and the debuffs UI is getting a revamp. Chris Proctor, he did allude to these changes back in our dev interview episode with him and Rodney. He also mentioned Xur is getting a revamp, much like the HUD improvements isn't something that they're going to share anytime soon, but it's in the future. But he did confirm Xur is getting a revamp. And in terms of the live service, just as a general kind of point that he wanted to make was the live service will evolve following the conclusion of the Final Shape. And just sort of related to that, Joe and Dan, who's the D2 general manager, will be live with a post-show Q&A after the showcase. Impetus, something here about armor.
Yeah, so Joe did want to respond to we're not going to be putting out a ritual armor set for this year, the Year of Lightfall feedback that the community kind of responded to. He wanted to explain how Bungie approaches armor, and he says that they're defined by visual categories, and there's higher priority given to the upper category, the upper tier of armor sets. And so in order here from highest priority on down, we have raid armor, dungeon armor, trials armor. That's the highest priority. Then you have the Eververse armor, second highest. You have the narrative, which refers to the season pass, the campaign armor next up. And then last, the ritual and the blue armor sets. So Vanguard, Gambit, Crucible. I don't know where Iron Banner would fall in this list, to be honest. I would lean probably towards ritual, but he didn't specify that. So we don't know if we're getting a new Iron Banner set as of his video. Joe did say that they failed to communicate that there was going to be a shift in the focus, resulting in fewer ritual armor sets. He did go on to say that in Season 22, which is next season, Bungie will convert an Eververse armor set into a ritual armor set that anyone can earn, and that will be coming out before the end of the season. So based on his wording, it didn't sound like it's going to be available right at the start of next season, but at some point in Season 22, we are getting a ritual, and I'm using quotes here, a ritual armor set that is coming that was going to be taken from the Eververse. So he did once again reaffirm as well that there will be a ritual set coming with the Final Shape, which is what was mentioned in the State of the Game. In terms of the broader communications, we did get a little bit more clarity from Joe about Bungie's approach. So they want to continue to have a transparent, open line of communication with the community. However, their top priority is to keep everyone safe. No one who works at Bungie should have to worry about their personal safety. So to protect the team, they will continue to use the branded Destiny 2 team Twitter handle and various Reddit accounts to share more insights with the community. Joe himself is also committed to streaming Destiny 2 in the near future, so you can join in and watch him play the game and presumably talk about the game in some fashion. We're not quite sure how that's going to work, but he did say to look for more details as to when the first Joe Blackburn stream will kick off sometime next season. So very exciting. That should be fun to watch him play, presumably the new content. But yeah, that was the response to the state of the game, if you will.
The stater of the gamer, you know.
That's right. That's right.
I got a couple things I wanted to throw in, just like kind of our own like view of like their changes here, it's great to see that they're going to respond to this and pull an armor set in, right? That you can earn. That's really cool. And I've kind of been thinking about this more because the consensus in our last episode was kind of, this doesn't really matter a lot to us because typically these armor sets roll with like very poor stats and they're not the best looking. So it didn't really feel like a big loss. And then I started thinking about, okay, how could they make this more meaningful other than just making the armor sets look better? And I would love to see something, especially for like strikes. There are so many tiers of strikes from your playlist to your GM, and I would love to see a system that is resulting in higher stat pieces of legendary armor dropping in scale with the difficulty of the activity that you're executing on, right? If I'm clearing a GM, I really do not feel that I should be getting a 52 stat point helmet of the Vanguard seasonal set. That is not seem aligned. The exotic armor that you're getting from clearing GMs is typically pretty high stat. I mean, I know it's not guaranteed, but the average of the stats from the GM exotics seem in line with that. But why not at the same time have a 60 point minimum, let's say on night, GMs or 60 point minimum maybe on Nightfalls with guaranteed one piece of armor drop that's like, 62 points or higher or something like that from a GM. I have no idea the amount of effort that would take to kind of code into the drop and things like that, but at least there's a way to make it feel like this ritual armor and stuff that you're getting or seasonal armor that you're getting isn't just like an auto shard pretty much every time you get it. I've got one more other comment on the Joe Blackburn streaming, but any thoughts on ritual armor and kind of just making that more valuable, you guys?
Not necessarily to do with ritual armor, but just a little side point to what you were talking about in terms of like GMs and that sort of high-end content. I was just thinking there while we were speaking is, Destiny players love going flawless in things. Why don't... Again, it really depends on how much work this would be made behind the scenes. But if you go flawless in a GM, or if you, in one encounter, if your team goes flawless or they hit a certain time, like a timestamp, if you're under this timestamp, kind of like speedrunning an encounter, you should get a guaranteed X thing. Maybe not armor, maybe not just necessarily weapons, but something that's enticing you to do something like that. Like, oh, let's all get our bootstraps up and really focus on this encounter so we can get some really great loot. Because the raid, dungeons, and trials armor are all like, they all look great. They are fantastically made pieces of armor, especially like Ghost of the Dungeon, which again we'll talk about later. Those pieces of armor have been like, I really enjoy that sort of taken effect. The cowboy stuff with Spire for the Watcher a few seasons ago, that all those gear have been excellent, but in the terms of like functionally, they are lacking. There's a lot left to be desired here.
I don't have a lot to add onto this from armor stat points. I mean, I really only care about ritual armor from a cosmetic point. So one less armor set is annoying. I've transmogged quite a few of the last pieces from Witch Queen. I liked the helmets actually for the Hunter and the Titan. Those I definitely transmogged. So, but it's fun. It's like, it's not the end of the world if I can't have a new set of armor to transmog, especially when the raid, dungeon, and trials armor sets look very distinctive. Aspirational, I think, is the word I would use. I don't, sometimes you need some really basic pieces to kind of pull something off, or like to ground your more exotic looking armors, and that's why I turn to the ritual stuff. But I could also use the narrative armor sets, the seasonal stuff as well. Like it. Yeah, I'm not torn up about it, but I understand people who do like to play fashion with their Guardian would be a little heated about it. I could kind of understand why this would be a big loss. So, yeah, hopefully that reverse set is enough for people to really get engaged with their fashion again.
Yeah. Another thing I've been thinking about when it comes to the visual categories that they're talking about. I remember the first time seeing somebody with Chatter White, which was the Vault of Glass shader that had a low drop trance, or the shader from Crota's End that had this like Glowhoo, yeah. And that got me thinking back, where are like the wildly standout shaders that you can get from stuff like this? If there was a low drop chance semi taken shader from like Master Kingsfall, a good lord, you cannot have fathomed the amount of time I would spend grinding that raid to get that to drop, you know. And the Ghost of the Deep armor set definitely brings that to mind, or just any armor set, yeah, like Glowhoo, like the shaders from a lot of those D1 raids had very standout appearances to them, and it gives that identifier of, oh, this is somebody that plays the raid a lot, that has grinded the raid probably, and is, you can immediately identify them. In the same way they talk about the visual language of being able to identify a player by their exotic piece of gear. Oh, this guy is wearing Assassin's Cowl. He's probably going to be a very punchy hunter, right? Or you know, this guy is got on, Luna factions. Like, he's definitely the support, DPS player for my raid team, and then whatever the idea is there. I think that the shaders are something that they've kind of fallen behind on that space a little bit, and I would love to see again.
Was that not Mementos? I mean, that's what I thought they were going. That's the direction I thought they were going.
And then what happened to
him? And then we only got the 3. So
yeah, that is a great point.
I don't know. I'm with you, absolutely, Saint. I thought we were going to be, getting Mementos, at least increased one, or a fresh set with Lightfall. That never happened. I've also been hoping for a long time that we'd get a dungeon and a raid one, but
So the Mementos, now that you bring that up, it gets me thinking about the fact that Memento can only be placed on a weapon that's like tier or level 25 or level 30. It's pretty high.
Yeah, high
right?
level.
I can't remember exactly what it is, but imagine if there was a shader that you couldn't equip until you got a seal unlocked. In a similar fashion of, you can't equip the shader. I can imagine the Reddit
posts right now, dude. Oh my goodness.
I'm just looking for minimal cosmetics that require maximum effort, because I'm just a triumph sadist like that. But I digress. The thing I was going to say about Joe Blackburn streaming is funny, because when I was working on contracted Bungie for a while, it was more common than not that when he would join a meeting and he was sharing his screen, it was just him playing through campaign missions constantly, all the time. Every time there was a new iteration of a mission, a new build, my man is out here grinding. He can't miss a meeting, doesn't have time to sit down and strictly play test. So he would be playing actively the thing that was being reviewed in the meeting while we were talking about it. And I do respect the dedication to, I'm not going to let any updated mission go past me. Like, I want to see every single, change, or try to be in there and experience every single major update of a new build, and kind of would check out when the meetings got more tense, right? Sometimes you need to just put the game down and focus on what we're talking about. But I've actually seen Joe stream Destiny 2 quite a bit already, so I think that he'll be pretty comfortable coming in, even if it is in front of a few thousand people instead of maybe 20 people. But all that to say, he's used to it. He'll be fine. All right, he's a streamer. Okay, don't let him fool you with a whole corporate veil there.
Before we wrap things up here, I think that this type of video that he put out, it wasn't necessary. Because they do have a big showcase coming up, but it was very appreciated. Like Bungie, from start of Destiny 1, like even throughout Destiny 1, their communication was pretty poor in terms of here's the next big expansion, and you don't hear from them for 6 months, and then here's the April update, and then you don't hear from them for 6 months. I am being quite kind of facetious when I say that. Obviously, we did hear from Bungie and the comms team. I'm not trying to put them down or anything like that, but they have vastly improved since then. But I think this type of content is what they do need. I think a lot of gaming they can learn from a lot of other gaming companies who do more kind of these down in the rafters. You're actually down speaking to the people that are playing this game, whether it's daily or weekly or monthly, just talking to them and doing these kind of content like live streams and videos. So, like, just to kind of say that, not just our podcast, there's many other podcasts out there that'll happily have developers on to speak about things. We're more than happy to talk about Destiny and kind of share it from our perspective, kind of break it down from our perspective, and the other podcasts that can do that as well. So yeah, that was just the point I wanted to make. Because I did send that to Joe Blackburn as well when he tweeted that out. It's like, how can Bungie improve communications? And it's like, well, you're doing a great job just now, but I think we just need to, step up a little bit. And it does link into this whole, Destiny has quite a few shitters in the community, and I think it's still a kind of rampant problem, which I completely understand why. At the same time, we want more comms from Bungie, but also this is the reason why, because people at Bungie get harassed, they get death threats, they get all this crap about sending people pizzas and all that. It's just like, come on, we do need to clear out these shitters from our community, and it's a big reason why. Looking at the Discord server, I've played it myself, and the other mods played a big hand in making sure it's a curated and positive place. Yes, there's people can be critical towards Bungie and the things that they're planning to do or they've done, but it's definitely not a place for people to come in and harass others, other gamers as well, other developers and that. So that was my big kind of point in terms of the communications for related to this video from Joe Blackburn.
We were supposed to spend a lot of time on this part.
I know.
Goodness sakes.
Yeah.
Surely we don't need to spend this much time on the artifact, right? We typically like to talk about this in depth at the first episode of the new season. So can we just go through and list them all? Is that all right?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Read through some descriptions. All right. We did get our Season 22 artifact preview here, and again, we'll list them out, and then we'll talk about some highlights probably when we're in the new season. Actually, we get our hands on these mods here. But column 1 here, we've got anti-barrier auto rifle. Last appearance was this very season. Actually, we had it, so that's coming back for a second appearance. Anti-barrier bowstring. This was last seen in Season of the Seraph, Season 19. Unstoppable scout rifle, that was Season 20. Season of Defiance was its last appearance. Overload hand cannon, have not seen this since Season 14. That's the Splicer season. Very interested to play with that again. Unstoppable fusion rifle. The language here seems like it is truly just fusion rifles and not LFRs, which was the case the last time it did appear, which was Season 15 at Season of the Lost. So yeah, hopefully, well, yeah, I don't know. If LFRs are included, sweet, but if not, fusion rifles will be just fine. This is one of my favorite mods, personally. Moving on to column 2, we've got our Siphon combos here. We've got Arc and Strand, Solar and Strand, and Void plus Strand. I think that's probably indicating what our surges might be next season, but we will see. Origin perk specialization number 1. This will improve the benefits, which are either duration or potency, usually, provided by the Head Rush. Not sure what that origin trait is. Potentially the Season 22 seasonal weapons. Nanotech Tracer Rockets, that's your Neomuna weapons. Unsated Hunger, which is your Season 21 Taken weapons. And Redacted, which we have no idea what that may be, so we'll have to find out. We have Diviner's Discount. All Scavenger mods are discounted. Sweet, that's going to be great. Column 3, Origin perk specialization number 2, which just increases the benefits and also allows all the weapons with the origin traits I just listed. They are overcharged in activities that have the overcharged weapons modifier active. We've got Elemental Orbs. This is a new subsystem coming to Season 22. While using the matching subclass Elemental Matching Weapon, Final Blows have a chance to spawn a matching Elemental Orb. Solar Orbs will create a solar explosion and apply Scorch to enemies. Arc Orbs create an arc explosion that jolts, and Void Orbs create a void explosion that applies volatility. Any player can pick up these Elemental Orbs and throw them. Nice little callback to some orbs that we were all a fan of a very long time ago, prior to Lightfall.
Elemental wells and warming cells have a baby.
Yes, crazy fun little baby. That'll be interesting to play around with next season. And then our final mod for Column 3, Thanatotic Tangles. It's hard to say. Strand weapon kills have a chance to generate a tangle. Moving on to Column 4, we've got Overload Machine Guns. Last appearance was Season 18. That's Season of the Plunder. Elemental Fury. Stunned champions take bonus damage from your abilities and Elemental Orbs. Communal Pickups. When an ally destroys or picks up your Tangle or Elemental Orb, the Tangle cooldown is reduced by 5 seconds. That's pretty hefty, actually. You will also gain bonus damage with weapons that match your subclass for 10 seconds. Refreshing Pickups. Picking up a Tangle or an Elemental Orb grants energy to your least powered ability. Semi-auto Striker. If you have fewer than 2 stacks of armor charge, rapid precision shots with bows, snipers, or scout rifles generate an armor charge. Okay. Moving on to our final column, Monochromatic Maestro returns from Season of the Seraph. Dealing matching elemental weapon damage increases matching elemental ability damage by 10% for 5 seconds. Dealing matching elemental ability damage increases your matching elemental weapon damage by 10% for 5 seconds. I can't remember if I used this or not during Season of the Seraph, but I do remember being very interested in it for raid setups. Rapid Fire Ranger, rapid precision hits made from a long range weaken the target. Sounds kind of related to an existing, quite old mod, Sundering Glare, which appeared originally in Season 13. That was Season of the Chosen, and then also reappeared in Season 18, Season of the Plunder. Sundering Glare worked where precision hits against combatants at 40 meters or further are weakened for 10 seconds, which was refreshable, and in both seasons that weaken was a 20%. There is a breakdown of different precision hits required to activate based on your weapon class. We'll retest this all. We won't go too far into the specifics here, but it's nice to see something similar to Sundering Glare return that was quite strong in certain GMs, I recall. We got 3 more here. Elemental Embrace. Subclass elemental buffs grant you bonus recovery and damage resistance against combatant attacks of the matching elemental type. Elemental Munitions. Combatant final blows with tangles or elemental orbs have a chance to drop special or heavy ammo. That'll be interesting. Frenzied Stacks. Our final mod here. Your armor charges grant bonus damage to your thrown tangles or elemental orbs, and your armor charge now decays over time. All right, Court Saint, what's one mod here that you're excited to try out that you haven't played with, or maybe one that you might have played with earlier that you're glad is coming back?
I think elemental orbs for me, just to see how that interacts with the thing. Like I said, it's the elemental well, and Warmind Cells had a baby. Sounds very interesting, and I think there's nothing. I mean, some of these are pretty interesting, but there's nothing that's jumping out. Like, I think they've been quite conservative in terms of there's nothing specifically related to the season. Like we had this season, it was Arc and Void, plus the annual Strand. We'll have Strand throughout the year, of course, but I think we're all expecting like Stasis as a focus, but that doesn't seem to be the case. This season, it's just like everything but Stasis. Anything else here? I think, that Rapid Fire Ranger is certainly something I'd be interested in trying again, see what if this has changed from Sundering Glare days. And rest just, I think, be really cool to synergize and test once we get all that out, which we'll talk about that in the new season. Saint, anything jumping out for you?
Yeah, Rapid Fire Ranger is really interesting to me because the last time we had Sundering Glare in 18, I believe it just wasn't worth it in most raid scenarios because of the way that it would stack. There's also the idea of being 40 meters away is really far. I think some people underestimate how far 40 meters is, and it is really great in some GM scenarios and things like that, but it's pretty far. Like, it's very hard to hit that in like the War Priest encounter or some other scenarios like that where you're just not really going to be that far away from the boss. That entire raid, honestly, like Golgi, the daughters, whatever, maybe you could proc it against orcs, but then if I remember correctly, there was this issue where it could override some of the other weakening effects, and it was only 20%. 20% is good. As soon as you bring out a tether or tractor cannon, it's not good anymore. And if it's going to override something like that, that's just not ideal. I can see the scenario in which you have maybe only one tether on the team, so the tether is going to go off, and then after the tether falls off, you have Rapid Fire Ranger at 20% to kind of keep the debuff going in a boss fight. That's great. And I don't know, I think that what's really jumping out to me to combo with that is the other precision perk, I believe, is Semi-Auto Striker. Yeah, if you have fewer than 2 stacks of armor charge, rapid precision shots, not kills, shots with bow, sniper, scouts generate armor charge. There is a certain exotic scout rifle by the name of DMT that is getting an updated perk pool next season. Between, Rapid Fire Ranger and Semi-Auto Striker, I'm seeing some synergies here that could be having those DMT stocks through the roof pretty quick. Well, I'm really hoping for some strong traits for DMT like Frenzy, and hoping they stay away from stuff like Rapid Hit because it just doesn't interact with that kind of loading mechanism very well, whereas something like Frenzy can be really good. So keep your eye out for DMT and some other scouts and the way that they're capitalizing on that stuff in next season. Last thing I want to say is just pretty bummed that it's anti-barrier auto rifle and overload hand cannon, and those two are not swapped. Really wanted to see anti-barrier hand cannon make a return from season 7?
8.
Yeah, it's been so long, and they had the chance right here, and they said, no, actually, we're just going to keep anti-barrier auto rifle the same season over season, which is a bit of a bummer because it's just static, and then we're going to make overload hand cannon the choice, and I just am not, I do not think that overload hand cannon is the best anti-champion thing out there, and I definitely am going to be using machine gun probably in its place because there are just so many great machine guns these days. Their ammo economy is good, their damage output is good. But yeah, that's all I gotta say. Any barrier hand cannon, please, for the love of the travelers, good lord, somebody just don't want to use
Ariana's vow, dude.
Yeah, yeah.
Saint just wants to thinking about overload auto rifles, Saint wants to stun them with the Monte Carlo, like the actual damage, and then flip to the bayonet and stab them to death.
Yeah, and the other...
that would be quite fun.
As selfishly as a Titan, the second chance gauntlets are barrier, and they're very dependent on your melee ability. So any barrier auto rifle makes using Monte Carlo with your anti-barrier gauntlets just 100% redundant, and I really want an excuse to use those gauntlets, man, but unfortunately they're gonna take a back seat because we all know Doom Fangs are about to just pop off next season. All right,
considering we have so many like overload things that can stun, because I'm redoing the graphic for next season, and overloads, and to be honest, unstoppables as well, but overloads have so many modifiers, especially Jolt. Jolt is such a prominent subclass effect. I would have just been like, can we just not have overload hand cannon in the first place? Just remove it and replace it with something else. Could have had auto rifle, anti-barrier, and overload. But that would cause some issues with how the priority system works. Before we go on, I just wanted to say, lot of mods here that are like match your element with the your subclass and your weapon, so they're really quintupling down on the whole like matching abilities. And I know we've talked about kind of mono builds before, and sometimes I kind of do like those type of like use one element and only one element, but I know some folks are not interested in those, match all the elements, get all the stars and the moons and the planets to align. But yeah. All right, moving over to the general weapon sandbox changes that are coming in Season 22. Again, we'll probably have some kind of more or kind of further thoughts kind of deeper into the season. But when it comes to some highlights here, there's a lot of zoom, decoupling and range changes. We're not going to get into that in this podcast. The changes do affect PvE, of course, but they are primarily a PvP change, so we'll just focus on the big highlights and stuff that we've not talked about. There were a few things in here that we've discussed before, hand cannons, so we're not going to talk about them. We've covered them about 3 times at this point, but there were a few kind of additional, like swords are getting a big rework, which are well explained here, and we'll go do a sort of mini breakdown here as well. So we'll cover those big highlights. First up, Waveframe heavy grenade launchers. The size and the damage of the self-damage AoE effect is now reduced, and this should make it much safer to fire a projectile closer to your feet. Yeah, of course, with it being a more kind of ad-clearing grenade launcher, that makes sense. Swords. All right, so we've got a kind of mini breakdown here. I'll kind of start us off with the keywords here, because there was a lot of exposition, there's a lot of context, there's a lot of kind of like confusing terms being lobbed about here. So I'll do our sort of the keywords here as a mini breakdown. So when they refer to sword energy, that is the node that replaces your powered melee on the character HUD while you have a sword equipped. This node shows you how much charge you have for your sword, and the charge is used for heavy attacks and for sword guarding. The sword energy is consumed by heavy attacks and also passively drains when you're sword guarding. When we refer to the charge rate, that governs the rate at which the sword energy is regenerated. Using any sword energy halts the energy regeneration for a few seconds, and of course the higher charge rate stat, the higher reduction this delay cooldown is. Sword guard refers to holding your keybind for guard. That will lift your sword up and cast a frontal shield. Guard resistance, so while you're sword guarding, incoming damage is reduced, and while you're moving, or I should say while you're sword guarding, your movement speed is reduced. And finally, guard endurance, which is a much larger and important stat here with the amount of bullet points their script are. So how long you can maintain your sword guard, which affects your sword energy. While sword guarding, but not receiving any damage, your sword energy drains passively. While you're sword guarding and you are receiving any damage, the sword energy passive drain pauses. The higher guard endurance stat, the slower this passive drain is. Guard endurance is, at least currently, pre-season 22, is calculated as the following. So passive energy percentage is drain per second. So let's say 80 minus brackets 0.75 times the guard endurance number. So as an example, you've got 50 guard endurance. So it's 80 minus the sum of 0.75 times 50, and that equals 42.5% passive drain per second. To put this in tiers, just to make it more kind of simple to understand, so if you're at 0 guard endurance, you'll get 80% passive drain per second, and if you're at 100, that is a 5% passive drain per second. The guard perk Infinite Guard, which is on the Warlock swords, and the Stronghold exotic for Titans, the gauntlets, they drain 0%, so you get no drain on sword energy if you're using both of those. All right, so that's the keywords here. Impetus, I'm going to pass you over to give the sort of changes in the overhauls.
Yes, so that's how it works right now. Now we're going to talk about how it's changing. So if you were just catching on, you had to pause, go back, really take notes. Feel free to start crossing through quite a few of these things because they are really doing an overhaul here. We'll start with charge rate. They have overhauled the system to now provide a bit more of an importance on the charge rate, which affects your sword energy. We're going to move over to guard efficiency now. You will no longer lose sword energy when taking damage while sword guarding, and they have removed the guard efficiency stat entirely. So if you could never quite understand what all those different sword stats mean, well, they're getting condensed down. So we're losing guard efficiency here coming up, and then heavy attacks can now be used with any non-zero amount of sword energy rather than requiring full sword energy. So this is a huge change, actually. This is a really, really great change for caster frame and vortex frame swords. It's going to allow for more heavy attacks. This is also, incredibly, a massive buff/fix to Black Talon, which has long suffered from the ineffective heavy attack. The catalyst, if you recall, is reversal. That increases the damage of the ranged heavy attack after you guard, but you had to use the sword energy to block, which meant that you were also therefore losing a chunk of damage because you didn't have full power to buff the heavy attack in the first place. So never quite understood how that was supposed to work, but it's going to work now, or it's being fixed now. The way around it previously was that you had to utilize the stronghold armor. You had to play Titan. That was how you got around it, basically. You had to have strongholds. You had to play Titan, of course, to make that work, but that is going to change now, so we can all use Black Talon together and rejoice at being able to use the heavy attack more frequently. So that is going to be a welcome change. More heavy attacks, we love that. Let's move on to guard resistance and how that interacts with damage reduction. So damage reduction has been overhauled while you block with the sword. Depending on your guard resistance stat, you will gain damage reduction to incoming damage. They have said that it will be between 82.5% and 95% damage reduction.
Oof.
While you're blocking. That is significant, and that's also going to put it a little bit more in line with our glaives, of course. I cannot remember. What's the current value for DR with the glaive shield? Is it in the 90s?
I wanted to say 92, but that could be...
Is it 92? It was like 95,
including
92.
a couple things in that.
Stupid high.
Yeah.
While we're looking that up, I'll keep talking here. The movement speed while you're guarding has been increased from a 0.75 times multiplier to a 0.85 times multiplier. So in basic terms, it means you get to move slightly faster while you're blocking with a sword compared to pre-season 22. All right, that's guard resistance and how it interacts with damage reduction and the change that's happening there. We're going to move over to guard endurance, which is the duration of perks that will increase the effects across every single one of the guard perks here. What we have in your column 2 perks, if you're keeping up here. Those with the shortest durations will benefit the most. So that's Burst, Balanced, and Swordmasters have the lowest stat gains for endurance. That's a +0, a +50, and a +50, respectively, here. For the Sword Guard, there are talent nodes, I guess is how we're talking about these. Those stats have been squished down a little bit. With the changes to guard resistance, charge rate, and guard endurance, those have had a net gain. They've all been increased across the board, and this is allowing origin traits and other sword perks more room to increase these stats and allow performance beyond their previous maximum here, which is good. I know we have a few origin traits that do interact specifically with swords that haven't really had a lot of time to shine. Talent nodes now visually affect the charge rate bar on the inspection screen, and when you hover over or select them, similar to other stat affecting nodes. We do have a note here about our favorite exotic sword, not Black Talon, the Lament, which has been special cased, so its charge rate and delay are unaffected by the global sword changes. It will still benefit from the guard resistance and the guard endurance changes. We're expecting it will perform similarly as it did pre-season 22, although the increased guard, damage reduction, and endurance is a great buff here as you need to rev up the sword as part of its exotic perks. So this will really help it with the point-blank engagements in your higher tier in-game PvE activities. So if you're already familiar with how the Lament works, you use it whenever you go in in-game PvE, keep on using it. It's going to be even better. So let's get into some specific perks, some guards, especially because those stats are changing or are diverging for a few of them. We're still not quite sure how everything's going to stack up. One of the questions I had, of course, is we'd love to recommend Swordmaster's Guard for most swords as kind of that default column 2 option. It'll be interesting to see if we now suddenly have to maybe go back and talk about different recommendations for different frames of swords here, but we'll look at some stat changes here just so you guys can have an idea and start looking at those swords in your vault already. For Balanced Guard, it's going to be a plus 50 guard resistance and plus 50 guard endurance after these changes. Burst Guard, we are looking at 100 guard resistance and 0 guard endurance. Enduring Guard has 0 guard resistance and plus 90 guard endurance. And then Heavy Guard is plus 80 guard resistance, plus 70 guard endurance, and a minus 10 to the charge rate. Swordmaster's Guard is plus 20 guard resistance, plus 50 guard endurance, and plus 10 charge rate. And then Infinite Guard, which again does only show up on the Warlock swords and the World Line 0, that's plus 50 guard resistance, and plus 100 guard endurance. And it is 97.5% for the Glaive DR versus combatants. My goodness, that is high. Okay, well, swords won't be quite as high as glaives. Wow, I can't believe it was 97.5. No wonder I can't die whenever I bring that into a GM. All right, all of that stuff out of the way. I feel like I've been saying the word guard a lot. I need to pass this over to Saint here because I'm going to lose my mind if I have to keep talking about the word guard over and over again here. What highlighted perks should we look out for here, Saint?
Yeah, I was gonna say it doesn't end there. You know, there's even more to it. The way that we are going to be approaching this is kind of trying to think about how can we capitalize on these adjustments, and there are definitely some things that you're going to want to spec into as far as ammo goes, because the way you're going to be able to use your more heavy attacks and things like that. Starting off with Enhanced Chain Reaction is a plus 20 to ammo capacity. Now, I believe there's only a few things that can roll with this trait as far as swords go, but still, I'll have to say it's going to be very valuable. Next up, we've got Cold Steel. You're going to get slow stacks of 40 slow for a light hit and 60 on a heavy hit, which would also give a plus 10 to ammo capacity with the enhanced version. And then Duelist Trance on Sword Kill, you gain the following: plus 60 guard resistance, 60 guard endurance, and 60 charge rate, which is ridiculous. The guard resistance and charge rate both get bumped up to 65 for the enhanced version of that. So Duelist Trance is actually really strong if you're going to be clearing things out with a sword. You can pretty much put all those stats to near 100, if not 100. We've also got Surrounded, which saw the Surrounded spec folded into it and become even stronger just a couple seasons ago. That is 35% damage increase if you're near 3 or more enemies. I believe that's about 8 meters, or within 8 meters. And then the enhanced version of that is 41.8%, almost 42% increase in damage if you're near 3 or more enemies with the enhanced version of that trait. This has seen some usage on the Briar's Contempt linear fusion rifle, and it goes to the deep dungeons, kind of popped up on some other areas like that. And it's going to be even easier with the sword to get surrounded, right? To get up there to proc this obscenely large damage increase. We've also got the Disaster Plan origin trait found on the Just In Case sword. Ammo pickups grant plus 100 charge rate for 1.5 seconds after swinging. Kind of a niche one, but still pretty nice if you're going to be in the big crowds. We have Field Tested, found on Nasreddin. I'm not honestly sure how to pronounce that, but that field origin trait does have an impact on your sword stats. Even though this takes a long time to build up, these bumps are really nice. It's really going to be easy to get to the first couple of stacks here, which are plus 5 to charge rate and guard resistance, and then plus 10 to charge rate and guard resistance. 3 stacks, going to take a little bit longer, plus 20 to charge rate and guard resistance, and then 4 stacks is really going to be a long time. 5 is pretty difficult to get up, but those are going to be 35 to charge rate, and then 30 to guard resistance. And then finally, at 5 stacks, if you're able to get to 5 stacks on field tested, you are truly just a Titan wall against the enemies of the world. You'll be getting plus 55 to charge rate and 40 to guard resistance. Don't really think those last few are realistic, but the idea that you could just be getting a passive plus 10 to that guard rate and charge rate is really pretty nice for Nasreddin. I'm definitely glad that I hung on to a couple copies of that sword in my hoard pile that is known as the Vault. Just a couple more here. We have Hot Swap. Upon readying a sword, you get 100 guard resistance, charge rate, and guard endurance, which is really high. Noble Deeds, found on the Caretaker sword, healing an ally or providing an empowering subclass verb, provides stacks of Noble Deeds up to 10, and when you get a kill, you'll remove 1 stack. This is granting plus 20 charge rate, or enhanced would be 40 charge rate, which is, again, pretty strong for Noble Deeds there on Caretaker. Unsated Hunger, the Thin Precipice sword. While grenade, melee, and class ability are all expended, you gain plus 50 to charge rate and 40 to guard endurance, and those would both be doubled with the enhanced version of that trait. And then finally, Viced Stinger, found on the Gold Tusk sword. For you hunters out there, hits have a chance to activate Viced Stinger for 7 seconds, and that is going to be a bonus to your charge rate. We're not exactly sure how much it is, but it definitely is a bump to your charge rate with Viced Stinger there, which is really strange to think about Viced Stinger, considering everybody's used to proccing off crits. But yeah, still going to be a really strong trait there. So I'm honestly pretty interested to see how the sword meta will shake up. Definitely seems like Lament, and our oh my gosh, Black Talon, right? We were talking about a minute ago, we're going to be eating good, but other than that, kind of hard to see how the sword meta is going to land here. Anything specific you guys are going to be looking to pull back out of the vault this next season before we move on to all our exotic weapon updates?
Well, you guys know I'm going to say bequest, but I think these. So we've said a lot of words here, but I think it all comes down into how this performs in practice, how it performs in game. Yeah, there's not a lot of they increase sword damage by 50% across the board. That's not happening here. I think when it comes to swords as in a weapon, going to perform a bit like glaives. You can really spec into the DR. I think that was kind of what was putting off, especially me anyway. I wouldn't really use a sword because guarding with it was a bit useless, and you'd only get a few seconds of DR in the first place anyway. But now that they've kind of decoupled that, they've got rid of the guard efficiency, you no longer lose charge on when you're sword guarding. When you're receiving damage, you no longer lose charge rate for that while you're sword guarding. But I think I've got a few in my vault. I've got Bequest I'm looking at. I've got Surrounded on that, and Relentless Strikes. Mm-hmm. Sword Masters, as we've always on the show, we've always recommended Sword Masters guards, and of course Jagged Edge. So I think I might take that out for a spin at some point. Bray Inheritance doesn't have any kind of sword benefit other than if you're just doing hits, you get ability stuff, but it's not related to boosting your sword. But Nasreddin may be an interesting one, because I was looking at the perk pool for that, and field tested is something that just works in the background. You'll lose stacks when you die. It's not something that you lose if you swap off it. So it's if you're not dying a lot, then you'll have those stacks fairly up there at some point anyway. But it does have Surrounded. Yeah, you can't enhance Surrounded here. But Relentless Strikes and Surrounded are there. So you could pair that with the stacks from Field Forged. That may be an interesting combination. And then just a few others here. I think, we haven't had a stasis sword for a while. I think we are due one. I think with all this big rework to the sword, I think they're going to start really pushing out swords as a weapon again, because we've had pretty, a lackluster amount of swords, quantity and quality wise, over the last kind of year, 2 years even. I do harp on about Bequest a lot because it is a really solid sword, but beyond that, we haven't had a lot of kind of great swords. But overall, yeah, I think these changes be great to see out in the wild, and see what people kind of pair and how all the guard perks work as well. Impetus.
Still cracks me up that Zypher has been in the game for 2 years, almost 3 years. With this upcoming Dawning, will be 3 years it's been around. Still the only stasis sword in the game. Still the only weapon that rolls the Cold Steel perk, which is a really good stasis perk. You'd think with the state that stasis has been in since they started 3.0ing everything after Strand's release, we'd maybe get some more opportunities for stasis swords to shine. So yeah, I'm really hoping we'd get a stasis sword next season because Zypher's a really good weapon, and it only comes around for one point in the year, and it can be very hard to get Cold Steel on it even to begin with because that's all RNG. So yeah, goodness, that one doesn't make sense to me. I do want to point out one last thing about field tested. The breakdown for the points required to hit your different stacks is very drastically different between primary, special, and power weapons. So it's not the 1001 hits required that it is for primary weapons. It's actually only 201 for times 5. And I think, this is probably easiest to hit on a machine gun. We don't have a machine gun with field tested yet, but I would say sword's probably the second easiest after that to get all the way up to 201 points. You get more points for killing harder enemies, and swords do really excel with that. So it should not be, if you're using it correctly, 201 separate instances of damage or kills. So you can really stack it up on those tier 2 and tier 3 enemies there. But yeah, 201 for times 5 on the power weapons. It's 131 for 4. So I think tier 4. So I think that should be pretty doable on the Nasruddin, really. It definitely has good perks to really, it's got surrounded, so you can probably hit that pretty quickly if I was thinking about like bringing it into a seasonal activity or something like that where you've got plenty of enemies and you don't have to worry too much about teammates getting all the kills. But yeah, I'm excited for these changes. So it'll be interesting to see if this is really a big shakeup. I mean, I think the more heavy attacks is going to be a welcome change for sure, because my goodness, that having that tied to your guarding stat as well was, I think, a huge hang up, especially when it was divided up really nicely for glaives. So now that we get to have the powerful attack and the blocking be kind of separate things that can really shine and get modified on their own without affecting one or another, that'll be a welcome change.
Yeah,
so.
And I think that will also change the optimal rotation for using Lament as a DPS weapon.
Potentially, yeah. I'd have to look at that again.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm not 100% on that, but it seems like it could shake that up. No stasis swords, but we got a hatchling though on Thin Precipice, and deadlings are eating good. Yeah, that's all I'm saying. 30% buff or whatever that we were talking about the other day, but.
We shall see, man. If that's the meta, dude, sign me up. I'll be all up in there with the little critters, man.
All right, Court, you want to take us into these exotic weapons here?
Yeah. Again, something that we'll probably just skim through here. Lads, if you've got anything to point out or say, just step in. But I'll read out all the exotic changes and I'll pass it back to Impetus for the perks here. So yeah, Monte Carlo, we mentioned earlier, yes, it's getting the stabby stab. The bayonet, it will become a usable item in the game. So yeah, our theories were correct. We are getting, well, at least for now anyway, it's the only kinetic glaive in the game. Maybe we'll get some in that slot next season as well, but so far it's the one and only confirmed. And yeah, so it's going to be part of the Catalyst. The Catalyst will give you that stab. Mossy Max, shout out to him. He was theorizing that based on the video that Bungie put out for the Monte Carlo in action, it looks like it was a 15.4 15.4x buff to the base melee damage to a trash ad. So that is comparable to Izanaga's Honed Edge shot, if you wanted that kind of supreme burst. So we'll see how that fares against like champions, mini bosses, and boss targets. But yeah, I think that's still going to be a massive damage buff. I think people have been wondering if Monte Carlo, the actual like perk, Monte Carlo method, I think it is, the swashbuckler, pre Shadowkeep swashbuckler will actually buff the stab. We're not sure. We'll see how all those synergies work a couple of weeks into the season. Two-Tail Fox is getting a little bit of a quality life update here. It fires a 3-shot burst with the catalyst instead of firing 3 rockets in 2 short bursts. So what was happening there, you'd have the solar and the void rocket, and once you got the catalyst, you'd get the solar and the void rocket. But the void rocket would, maybe not the right terminology here, but the void rocket would split into 2 and it would become an arc rocket kind of thing. But now it's just going to be 3 rockets that are fired during the salvo. Vergla Curve, Whisper Fissure synergy here. So the detonations now generate Hail Barrage. That's what grants you stasis arrows. Stacks if the stasis crystal was created by this weapon. Whisper Fissure's effects is basically increased damage and size of the stasis crystal AoE. Shiver Quiver, that's the catalyst, now activates when slowing enemies. And reminder of the catalyst bonus here is it's a 0.65 draw time multiplier, so that's 35% faster for 5 seconds. So nice little quality of life updates for Vergla Curve. Le Monarch, a lot of PvP changes here, but it does affect PvE. So the draw time reduced from 684 milliseconds to 612. Increased critical hit multiplier from 1.5x to 1.6x. The poison duration has actually been reduced to 1.75 seconds from 3, but they've also increased the poison damage to combatants by 50% just to kind of offset what's going on the PvP side. Vets Mythoclast, the RPM is reduced from 390 to 360 to match high-impact auto rifles, and a 25% damage buff to miners and elites. Not sure it needed that, to be honest. It does do work. As a pseudo auto rifle, fusion rifle.
And it will be unstoppable next season.
That's true as well. So yeah, interesting. Tommy's matchbook, the Scorch. So when Tommy's is overcharged, the values are updated from 14x base or 21 with Ember Vashi's. The Scorch numbers is now 15x at base or 20. So a little bit nerf to Ember Vashi's, but I think it's more front loaded to the base now. So you're getting more ignitions consistently. I think I definitely noticed that when I was testing out for unstoppable purposes. It wasn't really, the ignition wasn't proccing a lot. You wouldn't get much opportunity here if you were just going complete mafia mode there. Touch of Malice. So we were talking about this a few episodes ago. That's getting a big overhaul, and here we are. So the final round has increased in PvE by 20%. So this will go from 100%, that's double damage, to 140%. They've decreased the self-damage from the final round refresh tick from 10 HP to 7 HP. So when you fire with the final round, you'll only take 7 HP self-damage instead of 10. And the final round damage can no longer kill the user. So again, kind of similar to Tommy's matchbook, where it strips your shields, but it stops... It doesn't affect your health, so it keeps your health low. Similar here, you'll probably get to like 1 HP, but you won't be able to get down by your own touch of malice. But you'll probably get an acolyte or a Vex Goblin just smack you and completely end your run with touch of malice here. Touch of Mercy, they've increased the health awarded from 30 HP to 75. Touch of Mercy now works like the Unrelenting perk. So upon reaching 100% counter progression through weapon kills, gains 75 HP and begins the health regen. So this would be representative. Again, if this is like Unrelenting, it will it'll be rank and file, give you 33.4% progression, so that's 3 kills with trash ads, and then everything else is just a guaranteed health bump. So I think they did say it was going to be pretty much similar to Unrelenting. Le Monarch's got Unrelenting as well, so if you're familiar with that, then really solid change there for those two. And finally, the Ball of Darkness for Touch of Malice now deals arc damage. Not entirely sure why they said it deals with unstoppable champions and will also proc the Arc 3.0 sandbox effects, aspects, fragments, etc., etc. Because this has been the case since it was introduced in the game. But I think they're just highlighting that it now has arc energy. So
I
think that's
so
a nice
confused
little
by
proof.
this. I was like, wait,
Yeah.
was that not there? Did I just totally misread this in the first place? Yeah, seems
Oh,
strange.
so this deals arc damage, but not wolf backgrounds. Okay, I see how it is.
They want to make sure you knew.
Thematically taken, I think they've got arc energy. I don't know.
They're like, well, it blinds
yeah, no.
you, so it should blind them, right? That makes sense.
But I think they were just there to sort of highlight that it's got that particular synergy. It's a very interesting gun that they've completely overhauled here, so very, very cool. And so the final round DPS is going to be pretty up there. We're theorizing this should be Outbreak for DPS checks. I'm not exactly going to bring Touch of Malice into this type of content, but if you're sat in a well, you're going to get that refreshed health. The gun's not going to kill you.
Yeah, for Final Stand,
pretty well.
Yeah,
for
I think this is
bosses,
going to be the play.
If you have a teammate with a well, I mean, I don't know. Outbreak's going to be safer, but it'll be interesting to see if people actually do use this for like races and stuff, I think, where it matters.
Mm-hmm.
Because the self damage isn't as potent now, but I think that the well would be able to override that. Self damage.
Yeah, it'll be able to out heal it. Now you will have to account for the fact that you're probably going to be taking damage from other things, but I'm
thinking War Priest and how he'll blast you with his arc boomer kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I don't know why when I think of Touch of Malice and using it, I always used it in Destiny 1 during King's Fall. So that's where my mind's going with all these bosses that we would like Final Stand. But very, very curious, very interesting. That's definitely a weapon that's going to come out for, Monday night. I'm going to prepare a lot of weapons, move from the vault into my hunter, so I've got it all ready just in case Dim's not working. And finally, another scout rifle here, which is getting a glow up, fairly recent scout rifle, but they did commit that they'd be changing this. So Wicked Implement is the scout rifle here. It's creeping attrition. That's your 3 precision hits. They've increased the time between each precision hit that you need to hit from 3.5 to 4.5 seconds. They've increased the time of creeping attrition itself from 3.5 seconds to 4.5. That's what you'll also refresh the duration on additional precision hits here as well. So you've got much longer time here, 1 extra second. Tithing Harvest, that's the fully refills your magazine, will now also activate by destroying stasis crystals in addition to its current perk. So the current perk is collecting stasis crystals. Stasis shards. Fully refills magazine. Precision Final Blows creates a stasis shard that tracks you. And the Catalyst now also includes the Headstone perk in addition to its current perk. So Stasis Shards grants that +5 ammo to the magazine, and the Overflow goes up to 100% increased magazine capacity, so double magazine capacity. Those last two, Touch Malice and Wicked Implement, very interesting changes there. I'm very glad to see that Headstone is getting put onto Wicked Implement. That's some really great synergy there. That is becoming more and more Stasis the weapon, much like Collective Obligation is, Void the weapon. How are we feeling, lads? Lots of things there.
Yeah, I need to do that dang catalyst for Wicked Implement. Oh gosh.
Mm-hmm. This seems like when I read all the changes for Wicked Implement, to me, it sounds like they kind of already had this in the barrel or maybe this was like the original version of it, and then they mentioned this in the article, but they were a little concerned about how this would fare in the Crucible because, they were like, hey, remember when we launched Stasis? Remember when? And they toned it down, and it seems like now they have launched the weapon, and it landed okay, and it's fine. And now they have maybe, I don't know if they were just kind of planning this buff or this was like the original version. They're like going back to it, but really happy to see it get a buff. And it also, with we'll talk in just a second about some changes coming to Chill Clip, but the changes coming to Chill Clip getting a little weaker, Wicked Implement getting a little bit stronger, definitely I think will help it solidify its place in the sandbox. Like Corp was saying, is like, this is the stasis weapon, and this is how you should be using it. It's going to build into that kit, and it has real strong champ counter now from range for both overload and unstop, and it just got even easier given that you could potentially create a crystal off of a smaller enemy. You shatter that guy, and all of a sudden you've got that shatter damage affecting your unstopped champ, which is really nice. Yeah, and then touch of Malice on that final round DPS I think is going to be incredibly solid.
Yeah, more like punch to the jugular of Malice. Goodness, that is going to hit like a truck. Love that. That thing's just been in the vault after I did the Catalyst for so many seasons. Really excited for all of these, actually. But yeah, I gotta go finish that Wicked Implement Catalyst pronto. So I'm ready to benefit with it next season. That wasn't the only thing that got changed, though. We did have a number of weapon perks that also got tweaked, including the long-awaited, for some of us long-expected, buff to Bipod, I should say. So the damage penalty has been reduced from 40%, that's 40%, to 25%. I think the question that's on everybody's minds now, what do the damage comparisons look like? How does this stack up to our two other meta rocket launcher perks, which of course were Explosive Light and Bait and Switch here? Do we have the damage comparisons now? The theoretical damage comparisons?
So the commentary I was looking at was, I think it puts it in the sort of middling path. So Bait and Switch, Surrounded, and Explosive Light are still going to beat it out over a long period of time. But I think this brings it a little bit closer to kind of expected, kind of run-of-the-mill rocket launcher damage perks. Again, I think what they're trying to do with Bipod is trying to make rockets more of a burst option, which isn't, rocket launchers only have one in the magazine. Yeah, you get two with Bipod, and then you can pair it up with Envious Assassin to get like 5. And for like some other perks, you can get 4, and like Restoration Ritual with what you call the rocket launcher from the dungeon, Cold Comfort.
Cold Comfort,
yeah.
Yep.
Like you can have some really crazy like mag busting kind of perks here, but yeah, it's not going to beat out Bait and Switch, Explosive Light, and Surrounded, if that's your rockets that already have that.
Yeah, the stat penalties are just extreme. I mean, you basically have to have a really top tier reload perk to get over the -20 reload speed. The hurt to your blast radius means you just got to be on shot, which is frustrating. So yeah, I think they're playing it safe because there's a lot going on with Bipod, but yeah, we'll probably just stick to what we've been recommending this season. So
I think I would maybe bring Bipod in to like GM kind of content, because I'm not going to be really using Bait and Switch on a rocket launcher in that type of content, because it's content that you need to sometimes burst a champion down, or just kind of get rid of a bunch of ads. And yeah, that 25% reduction still, like, at the back of my head, it's like, no, don't use this, use something else. But we'll see. We'll definitely see. I do want to give it a fair chance next season. I think GMs may be the environment for it, because you don't need big damage perks for the bosses. It's about survivability and getting through kind of areas of a GM thing. Like the first week of the season is going to have Lightblade, for example. So that may be a place to use it, just to kind of burst down in the boss room, burst down the champions and the light bearers. But yeah, that's my thoughts.
First week's going to be Lightblade?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Did I miss that?
I was in the what do they call that? Next week in Destiny.
Next week, yep.
I missed it too. Don't worry.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, I know that Aegis had been working on a video about the true impact of Wolfpack rounds, so to say, and I think that he put that out already. I'm not sure. I jumped in to do some testing with him this past week, so I'm going to be interested to see what he came to as far as conclusions go for Bipod and how this might affect that meta because of the way that something like Explosive Light doesn't have any impact on the rocket or Wolfpack rounds themselves, but typically traits that are applying like an inherent modifier to the rocket launcher do have an impact on their damage. So interested to see how that may kind of shake things up. I'll have to go watch that after we finish recording today. I think that just came out.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Of course, we'll continue to see, as more rocket launchers get the bipod perk, how that shakes out. If there is an exception, if we do come across a rocket launcher where we can really truly recommend bipod over the other options there. But yeah, looking like bait and switch surrounded Explosive Light are still gonna do you well. So you can stick to those for the time being. Envious Assassin. There is no longer a time limit after kills within which you must activate the perk or get another kill. And for me, more importantly, the perk will now activate even if the magazine is overflowed. So it will stop activating once you hit the maximum magazine size of 2.5 times or greater. This is huge because that part of it for me is what invalidated the Envious Assassin on primary weapons, because of that typically larger magazine size, having to get all the way up there and then keep going to the overflow point before I whip out the weapon. So that's going to be a much nicer. I probably still won't use it on primary weapons, but I think it's going to be a really strong option for certain special weapons, and then of course heavy weapons. The enhanced version of Envious Assassin now provides fractionally more ammo per kill instead of a longer window of time after a kill. Interesting to see if that changes. We don't have Envious Assassin on a craftable rocket launcher, right? It only shows up on Cold Comfort right now. I think that's right.
Yeah, I need to. So. Yeah, I think that's right.
That would be interesting to see if the fractionality is high enough to transfer a rocket over. Should it show up on should Envious Assassin show up on a craftable rocket launcher. But all in all, good change there. I feel a little bit better about recommending Envious Assassin for certain weapons now. I think that's going to be excellent. Over.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. Braytech Osprey and Crowning Duolog also have Envious Assassin. But again, they're not craftable either.
Yeah. Gotcha.
So yeah, whenever we get a craftable Envious Assassin, we'll be very raised eyebrows.
Yeah.
Cold Comfort eating good in the meantime.
Sure, for sure. Over, we did know that there was a buff coming to that. They have increased the bonus damage against combatant shields. We don't have a value for that. And we've been told that it will deal significantly increased damage, again, no values here, to the following: enemies who are enhanced by Dark Cabal overshields, enemies that are shielded by Lucent Moths. That's the list, but I don't know if I'm still going to recommend this perk for PvE. Remember, it does also do extra damage to Guardians with an overshield in PvP, right? Is the Crucible interaction for that? I can't recall, but regardless, I don't know. Over still struggles because it shows up at Column 4, and we have so many other great options when it comes to PvE damage perks in Column 4 for many weapons, so I'm not sure if this is going to be enough to change it, but again, we still don't know the values, so we'll wait and see how much of a bonus or how much of an increase this is. But it's cool to see the Dark Cabal Overshield and Lucent Moth interaction there with Over. Shoot to Loot no longer triggers the reload when shooting a special brick that could not be picked up, while also having an overflowed weapon equipped. That's a nice quality of life change. And a much bigger, helpful, useful change, explosive damage perks like explosive payload, kinetic tremors, etc. now interact with picking up orbs of power, which Shoot to Loot can do now. So great change there. That increases the area of effect for Shoot to Loot when you are aiming at orbs of power. That's going to be a wonderful change. Really looking forward to that. And then finally, the big one here, Chill Clip. One of the strongest, if not the strongest weapon perk in the game when it comes to PvE. They have reduced the slow stacks from 60 stacks to 40 stacks. Still going to be incredible. Don't panic. This changes a few things, but it doesn't change it enough that your precious Riptide, strongest legendary weapon in the game, don't at me, is still going to be one of the strongest. Top 3 for sure. And then they've also added in here that Wolfpack rounds will no longer trigger this perk. We can finally put that discussion and debate to bed. I'm immediately deleting my Bump in the Night. It's trash now. Absolutely no reason to run that rocket launcher now that I can't have Chill Clip on it. No, that's a joke. Still run Bump in the Night if you have it. It's got some great reload strats with that enhanced field prep. But yeah, Chill Clip wasn't an option on rocket launchers. Now it's definitely not an option on rocket launchers. You can stop worrying about that. And it's been brought down to earth, which is a nice change there. How are we feeling about these perk changes? Saint and Court. We like them. We love them. We hate them. What's going on?
I was really hoping to see more for Under Over. I don't know. Maybe I'm underestimating its value, but doesn't seem great at first glance. Shoot to Loot is awesome. Envious Assassin change, that's awesome. Good to see Bipod kind of in a viable state, if nothing else. And the whole Wolfpack rounds no longer working with Chill Clip. I'm just glad Bungie sat the community down and said, stop it, get some help, okay? Delete the Chill Clip rockets, all right? We're tired of running into it in our own LFGs, all right? Just get it out of here.
Oh no.
Yeah, some nice changes. I think, Under Over, I feel like they could do a little bit more to it. We were recommending some changes last episode, and it just feels like unless this is really a really big buff, it's just I don't think we'll be recommending this because unless we have a lot of enemies that have the Dark Cabal overshields, have got different other types of overshields. We've got Lucent Moths around as well. Maybe Ghosts in the Deep because Lucent Moths are very prominent in that dungeon. But I'm a bit. We'll see. Again, don't want to really be too harsh on a perk I haven't really tried out because the significant damage could be really high, like one shot kind of stuff. But Chill Clip, as expected, I think we're all kind of expecting that to happen. I think it's a little bit of a shame that it's more of a bigger nerf to rocket launchers and single launched grenade launchers compared to Riptide. I think this is one that they could have. Again, me sitting here as the armchair developer talking about, branching it between different weapon types. Riptide could have had this 40 slow stacks, not Riptide, but fusion rifles, and then grenade launchers and rocket launchers, which are you only get one anyway, and you have to reload. It's just going to be a much bigger pain to try and slow and then freeze with those weapon types. Yeah, I think. Slow is just like the kind of ice variant of Solar Scorch, how you need to combine multiple stacks and sources of slow to get that freeze. But because it's so easy with Riptide and the other fusions, Deliverance can still put out some great damage with Chill Clip for utility, I should say. It's fairly easy for them just to keep your finger on the trigger, and you'll 3 shots will freeze a combatant, whereas a rocket launcher and a grenade launcher is going to take multiple direct hits. Might I add? It's not just the kind of explosive effect and AOE. You have to get those direct hits. It's a bit of a shame. But
that also reminds me. We had a high impact fusion with Chill Clip as well, right?
Yes, or Vandal.
Yeah, it seems strange that and Riptide still take the same amount of shots to freeze, but it's still taking triple the time to get those shots off. Doesn't seem, kind of along with what you're saying, Cord. It would make a lot of sense if the high impact fusion could freeze in 2 shots, but the rapid fire one would take 3.
Again, we don't know how much kind of, they've talked about perk budgets. They've talked about how, they only have X amount of capacity when it comes to these perks, and they can't necessarily just shove a bunch of like branched tech to make sure one weapon type gets it and another weapon type doesn't. So perhaps in the future, but this is a great change overall in terms of the health of the game. It brings other weapons up. As I said both on this podcast but also on social media, is that some things do need to fall for other things to rise. And as you were saying earlier on, saying about Wicked Implement getting a nice little buff in addition to, Chill Clip's not as potent on some weapons. Wicked Implement's now getting this is probably the weapon you want to use for freezing, for slowing and then freezing. All right, let's speed through the weapon crafting section. There's nothing really kind of for us to extrapolate on other than just kind of the highlights here. So they are changing the weapon level farming, the progression, so the sort of overflow from one level to the next, they have fixed that. So for example, the 95%, and you got 20% gain from completing a GM, for example, you would just hit the next level, but it wouldn't overflow to the next progression level. I think you guys probably have noticed that annoyed me. Like completing an activity, you weren't really min-maxing there, because if you were at 99% and you completed it, then you'd only get that 1% and not the other 19. It's really frustrating. So they have fixed that. So it should, for example, appropriately go to 50% on the next level of progression. They've increased the progression on defeating guardians in PvP, and they've boosted the completion progression for the following: Crucible, Trials, Dares of Eternity, Wellspring, Gambit, and Legend/Master Solo Lost Sector Platinum completions. They're adding Motes of Light for weapons. Use some currency to boost your weapon rank. This will the mod will increase the weapon's level directly, leaving the existing progress towards the next level untouched. They still want they want to provide an alternate method for leveling that allows for both the jump starting of a crafted weapon and also the ability to level a larger amount of weapons stockpiled in your inventory. They do not want the level boosting cost to feel prohibitive, but they do want to make it so you kind of make choices over which weapons they want to boost, and it will cost exponentially more the more that you boost, kind of as expected. Crafting economy changes here. Resonant and harmonic alloys, so that's from your raids, will be deprecated as a required material. No longer obtained in Season 22, and you can exchange them for Glimmer at Rahul, and then they'll eventually remove the entire set of those two resonant and harmonic alloys in the future. And finally, just some quality of life Neomuna and Throne World vendor upgrades. They're making it so for the vendor upgrades will increase the drop chance of Deep Sight, Neomuna, and Throne World weapons respectively. This is retroactive, so if you've already completed those vendor upgrades for Deep Sight, Neomuna weapons, you can get one per week at the weekly Pinnacle story. And there's some bug fixes to an underlying issue where it decreased the Deep Sight drop rate as you neared the completion of a pattern set. I certainly felt that. I felt that when I was farming for the weapon that escapes me, but I basically didn't have it for the entirety of Season 20. Iterative loop. I was convinced there was something wrong, and here we are. So that's getting fixed. And that is it for our big first half of the episode.
Don't say first half. It's not first half, I promise, guys.
Yeah, I know. We've got a little section coming up for our sort of Season 21 review, but I don't think we're going to spend too much time here. Just kind of giving our quick thoughts here. But yeah, let's kick us off here. As we normally do, story, narrative arc. Obviously, we know Deputy Commander Sloan is back, and Asa is the best lass. Thoughts?
kind of figured they were going to build up to... No. Kind of felt like they were building up there to be a little bit more of a tension with her being somewhat taken and losing herself to the taken stuff, but it seemed like they went in a direction where she is struggling, but it's against Zivu Wrath versus being taken. And the Zivu Wrath part was I guess we're kind of leaving it where she has the strength to fight it with Asa's help, but she's still taken. And like that's like kind of a big deal. And I know that there are a lot of gameplay mechanics where, you know, us players kind of become taken or take on taken energies and raids and seasonal activities in the past. So she's just kind of left in a weird spot where I don't know what's going to I don't know if we'll ever see her again. Like, it's nice that she came back after Titan had the pyramid ship or the darkness take over, but I don't know. I thought we were kind of in a point in the game story where we were getting some pretty definitive closure, especially with what happened to Amanda last season. So to have her just kind of end up where, you know, she's just chilling on Titan and Asa's also there. We got to meet Asa, but she's also just kind of chilling after telling us some pretty big information about the witness, where the witness came from. It just seems a little bit odd. So I guess maybe we'll have more to come prior to the final shape, but yeah, the story did not go in a direction that I thought it would. Is kind of where my closing thoughts are, at least. How about you, Saint?
I would generally agree with the idea that it seemed like Sloane was left in a weird state and didn't really end nearly as negatively as we may have thought. This may sound kind of cruel, but I'm definitely hoping that she is influenced by Zivu Arath further and is used as like an agent of Zivu Arath, and we like hear her speak through her later down the line, because I think that would make the impact of the season much more interesting. They talked about this in the state of the game about how they want the seasons to be more meaningful in the context of the overall story. I do think that is true, even if it came at the cost of what's going on in how Lightfall was received and the story went over there. I do feel like this really did drive the story forward more. And yeah, I think that the example I get of this from a recent example is I've talked about, I played through Fallout 4 recently, and there's a scene in which one of your companions can basically use the memories that were kind of artificially stored in another person's brain and then wire them onto their brain, because they're like a robot, a synth, they call them in the game. And then you can view their memories like through the other person's mind. So you're kind of like attaching his memories to this other person, and then you view the memories through their mind, kind of in the way that like Sloane is like the vessel for how Asa is like communicating to us. And then later on in the game, you will just hear the other person talking through the person that was the conduit. And it's very creepy because the other person that you are stealing the memories from tried to kill you in the first place. And that is pretty uncomforting. So I think, again, that would be a really interesting way to see that, is to have Sloane basically just outburst in like the voice of Zivu Arath and still struggle with like being taken later on in the next couple of seasons. We also had the veil containment stuff, which was really, it was long. There was a lot of veil containment messages throughout the season, and I don't think that a lot of people accessed all these messages, and some of them were pretty dark. There's some pretty big lore hits in these, like, spoilers, if you have not completed all the veil containments, the next 60 seconds of dialogue. The person that you see running Future War Cult is not actually Lakshmi 2. It is a copy of Maya Sundaresh that she sent back in her place to manipulate and rule over Future War Cult, which was like kind of a lore bomb, to be honest with you, that they just like snuck in there. And then it also explains so much about the way that the veil works. But I just felt like it was not handled in prominent enough of a way to like drive people to the activity. I don't know. Thoughts on veil containment?
Yeah, the veil containment stuff was... Yeah, there was some really juicy like lore bits there, but I'm still just frustrated that wasn't just part of the Lightfall campaign in the first place. Like, Destiny's always had those like exposition that's being kind of thrown at you behind the scenes, and like you have to go somewhere to see them. But this was like the worst case of that I've seen for a long time, because it was on Neomuna. It wasn't on the initial splash screen. Like when you load up Neomuna on the map, you have to then scroll to the southwest direction to then eventually see that there's something there. I didn't see that at all until someone told me there was a node, maybe 2.5 seasons in. I was like, oh, I didn't realize there was something like that. So like the way they could have presented this and delivered it definitely would have needed a lot more improvement. And if we're going to get more of that, they need to have something that's more direct, or something that's more like, I don't know, big red arrows that point down, just to say, look, you've got something down here. You can listen to some kind of backstory to Neomuna, and the sort of the rolling story that we have. Just pretty disappointed with how it was delivered, to be honest. Impetus, you got any thoughts there? I know you do.
Should have been a lore book, man. I mean, I love having professional voice actors read out lore books to me, but like, it didn't change how I feel about an actual playable activity, which is like, I don't want to just stand around. I want to take an active part. Like, you maybe click on the node. I'm out here in this very specific part of the Neomuna map, and I'm just listening to people talk. And, I was like, okay, can we wrap this up? I got other things I want to do. We got weapons to craft, catalysts to complete. Like, let's go, people.
Yeah, it did feel like a narrated lore book. Now that you say that, it really did.
It was very blatant. Tune in next week for the next episodes, and then tune in the next following week. And it that was just another point of contention I had. There was very like heavy, like, oh, I don't know. Well, we'll need to encrypt this. Well, does it take a week for it to encrypt? Why is it? I know there's this like every week that happens in Destiny. You could potentially extrapolate that as it's one like 24 hours in terms of like in-game like lore. It's not official or anything like that. That's just in my headcanon. But it just like the whole. Tune in next week for the next 30-second clip. Just really irked me, to be honest. There wasn't the vibe.
The narrative team did a bunch of interviews during this season where they kind of explained and outlined their approach to Lightfall and the story that they're trying to tell. And we learned from these interviews with various outlets, gaming outlets, that they wanted to have these first 2 seasons be kind of the aftermath of Lightfall, and then the next 2 seasons of the year, the upcoming seasons, are kind of going to be the build up to the final shape. And I'm fine with that. I think there should have been some heads up that this is how they're going to do things, because it came across after completing the Lightfall campaign like the story was unfinished. And the veil containment structure definitely did not help with, we've planned all this out. You're going to have to play through these seasons to get more and more of the Lightfall story. It just feels like they're making it up as they go along, which I don't know if that's more a symptom of the live service game or what, but I wish there could have been a little bit of a heads up. I think I would have probably received the Lightfall narrative a little bit better if I had known that things are going to be the following 2 seasons, which we were told the names of ahead of time by Joe Blackburn in the State of the Game a year ago. Like, it would have been cool for him to say, hey, just so you know, we're taking a different approach to the story. We're gonna really draw it out. We want the next 2 seasons, or the season that comes with Lightfall and the season after that, to really wrap things up. We're gonna push the narrative arc out a little bit than we normally do with other expansions. I don't think that would have taken away from the marketing of Lightfall. I don't think that would have taken away from the mystery of what's happening on Neptune. I think if anything, that would have been like, oh, cool, they're taking a risk. It's always cool to see Bungie still making changes, trying to shake things up to keep seasons refreshing. I think there would have been space there for them to spin that in a positive light, but they didn't do that. And now it's like, okay, well, we didn't get a lot of answers with the end of the Lightfall story. Now I gotta wait till Season of the Deep comes out. Okay, Season of the Deep has come out. Now I need to go to this one node and hear Osiris and a few other people talk about things. and I need to keep doing that week over week over week over week over week for a lot of weeks, so way too many weeks. And in the end, yeah, it just feels like a lore book that was narrated to me quite well.
And I think another part that like compounds this is, man, you guys set the own standard for yourself when you put that Witch Queen campaign out there in the game. You set the bar high for your own, for like the players' expectations, right? And I think that is what drove like such a conflict here, because that was the expectation for this campaign, and there was no communication to say that the player expectation should be otherwise. And I also think it may have been interesting if this was in the first season. I wonder how that would have impacted the way that people saw the Veil and the Lightfall's release if these Veil containment bits had been coming out every week during Season of Defiance, right? Or Season 20, along with Lightfall kind of explaining it. I don't know. Who's to say?
Yeah.
All right, well, we did get some activities and gameplay loops in Season of the Deep. Of course, we had the Salvage 6-person activity, we had the Deep Dives and the Pressure Trials, and we also had one of the Battlegrounds, Psyops Moon Battlegrounds as a Grandmaster. So I'll kick us off here, kind of giving us a overview. Deep Dives, Pressure Trials, big thumbs up. It was very great listening to Kit Kutcha talking about kind of from his perspective when it comes to like those sort of difficulty type of content and how they approach it. Definitely want to see more of those type of content when it comes to Deep Dives. Very great piece of content. The sort of escalating power as you go through it. The more kind of pressure trials you do, it gets more difficult. You really got to be on your game. I love that type of gameplay loop. Something we've never really seen in Destiny 2. It's not. It just felt refreshing as a type of content. I suppose we'll talk about the loot very shortly here. But I was certainly getting a lot of loot. I was getting a lot of red borders as well. Just diving into deep dives and doing the pressure trial. The Moon Battlegrounds, very great to play. Yes, it is very. It's a doozy in that boss fight arena, but again, with a lot of the GMs, it does take a little, a few runs to actually to get to it and to get that vibe, that kind of cycle. The one miss, I think, with this season was definitely the Salvage. The 6-player activity just felt, another soundbite here from Court from Podcast versus Enemies. Not a lot of ad density. Just really pretty disappointing. You are fighting ads. You're fighting your teammates for ads, and I just can't really enjoy that type of content. It just goes on for a little bit too long. Not a lot of things to kill. And it just gets a bit boring after a while. So it's definitely one of the lower tier 6-player activity. Impetus, what's your thoughts with the 3 big highlights here?
I like deep dives. I'd be interested in seeing that kind of activity come back. It's just now struck me. The reason I don't like Salvage, so I didn't play a whole lot of Salvage. Like, I felt like I did it maybe the first 3 weeks and then just fell off immediately from playing it. And I think it's because it doesn't give me pinnacle rewards. Like, it just gives you powerfuls. And again, I want to be clear here. I love that we don't have the light levels going up. Like, I really, truly love that. But I'm worried for however the seasonal activities look for next season. If they've split them up into 2 different types of activities, which has been a pretty common strategy, the one that probably just gives you powerfuls is not going to see a lot of playtime. Like, at this point, a lot of people are probably at pinnacle cap. And if you're not offering pinnacle rewards to bring people's levels up, especially in the 3rd of 4 seasons throughout the year, they've caught on to this and said we're going to change the reward structure up so that you're not having to just do one of the 2 seasonal activities for something that can actually make your power level go up. Because I definitely didn't need anything that Salvage was offering me. I was getting those deep engrams through a bunch of other sources. The red border stuff was dropping far more frequently for me in the deep dives and the pressure trial stuff, or just through straight focusing of the weapons at the vendor. So, yeah, I mean, Did Salvage have a legend difficulty? Or is that Deep Dives that had a legend difficulty? One of them did. I never even did it. I didn't have a reason to really do it other than a triumph. Did you guys do a legend difficulty for one of the seasonal activities?
There is a legendary difficulty for Salvage. But again, I never done it as well because there's no reason for me. Deep Dives is Pressure Trials is shit like your legendary mode. That's what kind of turns into that. It doesn't have a node that you select to make Deep Dives legendary. You have to do it within the actual activity.
Yeah, it does feel like Salvage was designed for like last year's seasonal grind where we still had to go, our power had to go up, and having powerful rewards did matter. But for this year, with the changes that they've made that I like, that I think a lot of people like, Salvage just really, I think, has fallen flat for me, and I imagine it probably fell flat for quite a few of you listening. But Deep Dive's great. We didn't do a Grandmaster breakdown for PsyOps Moon Battleground, did we?
No, I mean we've been off. We've been busy.
Yeah. Sorry, guys.
Next time it comes around.
Yes, definitely next time.
We are getting more Battlegrounds. They have said that.
We'll definitely cover that. Again, fun to play the first time. I don't ever want to do it again. Unless the weapon that's dropping is actually worth it. Like, which I think is going to be a common sentiment for GMs going forward. But yeah, we'll get to the loot in a bit. How about you, Saint? What were your thoughts on the activities, the gameplay loops?
Yeah, I couldn't have even told you that there was a legend salvage option if you had asked me just a minute ago. The rogue mechanics on Deep Dives, where you're having to pick your defense or damage bonus kind of options every time you go through it, it just keeps things a little bit different. Oh man, cannot say how much I think that adds on to the replayability of an activity like that. And I really hope that they keep those type of mechanics going forward, especially when you have the option to crank the difficulty tiers up, but then hand in hand with that, you're also getting bonuses that you have access to as the difficulty tiers go up, and you can kind of build into your character or pick ones that go with the build that you happen to be running that specific activity, and that is just top-notch, absolutely awesome stuff there. Really enjoy that and hope they double down on that.
No champions as well.
No.
They're learning.
No champions.
They're learning.
And it still felt challenging, no?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Moon Battleground, a bit of a slog. And the bug where you would not get platinum because of the thing where a champ could despawn just really got me after giving that a few attempts, finally clearing it and not even getting platinum. I was like, all right, we're done with that for the season.
Well,
that wasn't...
sorry, go ahead, Saint.
I was just going to say... We got a lot of weapons though this season. So some of the activities may have been a miss, but there was a lot of weapons, and some of those were absolutely hits. The original Reckoning weapons coming back, the Taken variants of those weapons, the Last Wish craftable weapons, and we even had more world drop weapons coming in. So absolutely no shortage there. I think it's not hard to say that the reprise raid weapons that they keep bringing back are absolute hits, especially considering, these guys had 4 trait pools, 4 perk trait pools back in the day. And now some of these went from fine to best in slot, best in archetype type of a situation. And you absolutely love to see that. We were just talking about how we finally kind of finished up crafting, leveling our last couple of weapons this past week, and I know I've absolutely been loving using Nation of Beasts. You can put, Volshot Dragonfly or Explosive Payload on that thing, and it's going to be a menace this next season. Apex Predator is firmly in a top spot for DPS dealing options. Any other favorites from out the season? I know there was a lot of Reckoning and Taken weapons. Are there any of those that you guys have been using still, or just not really a lot from that set in my eyes, but anything for you guys?
So I've been using Different Times, which is the Strand Pulse Rifle. I've got Golden Tricorn and Stats for All, probably going to enhance both of those. Primarily just been using it on my Strand subclass just because the threaded spikes really great to proc Golden Tricorn, and it just feels like it's a monster. Different times tearing all the ads up here. Plus, if you've got like unravel rounds, it's just all these green particle effects everywhere. The other two options were the heavy. You already mentioned there with Apex Predator, went from 0, like literally tier F, to S plus tier. It's just such a glow up that thing had. And then Thin Precipice. I've been using a lot of that sword. Might be some like raised eyebrows there, but it is a Vortex sword. It's going to get that kind of indirect buff next season. You can kind of use that Vortex a lot more often. And I've got Hatchling on that just to, play into the whole Threadling build with my Hunter and my Warlock. With Relentless Strikes as well, so I'm getting ammo back. So those are the three kind of highlights that I'm looking at on Dim. They're all three of them are on my Hunter. So yeah, I'm using them a lot. Impetus, what big highlights you got here?
All right. I will say that
if any.
Last Wish doesn't really count as that was accessible to everybody that owns Forsaken, but yeah, taking that weapon pool out, I think this is one of the weakest seasons for me in terms of the weapons. Not a lot to desire. I think the one that I have it, but I haven't even shot it yet, is I got a Spare Rations 2 nights ago with Rapid Hit Kinetic Trimmers, and I'm getting that for the future. Like, not even something that I'm using this season. I'm doing it because of the hand cannon buff that's coming next season, and that I can't really say for either Reckoning or Taken, besides Spare Rations, that there's something that I like used actively outside of leveling it up to try out some perk combinations. There were a lot of perks that I was excited about that were new this season. I love Collective Action, I love Controlled Burst, but not on the weapons that they showed up this season for the seasonal weapons. If anything, I like them more on Last Wish. But yeah, this was really, I did not feel like there was a lot for me to chase when it comes to the season. Not that I expect that every season. At this point, I've got a really solid vault with a bunch of different options. I'm not at that point where I expect to have my mind blown every single season, especially by stuff that's not coming from an in-game source. But yeah, it was hard for me to log in after having half the stuff even unlocked for crafting, knowing that I'm not even going to uncraft it. Like, I'm not even going to make one. It's just going to show up in my menu. It's like, oh yeah, that came out that season. So I don't have a lot of positive things to say for stuff that was truly unique to the season. Again, Last Wish weapons, love them. We gushed about them when we did our weapon breakdown. There's definitely stuff in the dungeon that I want to chase, but that's a separate purchase. That's not involved, or that's not something that we can really tie into the season necessarily. But yeah, that's the thing. When we talked about the Reckoning weapons, like, even if they had made them craftable, I'm not sure I would still even have copies of those. Like, I would have probably made the Spare Rations, and that's it. Like, snipers just aren't in a spot where we can really use them. That's two of those. There's 2 snipers. That takes those out of the pool. Different Times is, yes, our first strand pulse rifle, but its perk pool is so weak that it practically guarantees the next strand pulse rifle will be better. So I'll just wait for that, because there's not really much of a use case for it right now, other than to say I've got a weapon in the kinetic slot with Collective Action, but we know that's going to change next season. Bug Out Bag is nice if you don't have Mida, and I have Mida, and I love my Mida very much, and I'm going to keep using my Mida. I'm trying to think. The swords, swords are swords. I guess, yeah, I'm not sure. I don't actively use them a whole lot. I'd rather be using machine guns because those feel really great. I'd rather be using rocket launchers in situations where I need to worry about my damage. So not a whole lot of reason to run the 2 swords. And that's pretty much most of them. Targeted Redaction, I have a bottom dollar with explosive payload. That's kind of my Void 120, but neither of those are better than Palindrome Adept. So not a really unique reason to run it. So I don't know. I'm sorry to be the last person to be so down, but I did not have a lot of interest in a lot of the weapons from these 2 sets here. I was hoping for more from the Reckoning coming back. I'd heard so much about those weapons when they were originally around, and I guess I'm going to have to keep hearing about them because I'm not seeing a lot of appeal for the reprised versions of those.
No, I can definitely echo your sentiment because some of these weapons were pretty very lackluster. For me personally, though, the two Discount and Apex, different times and Thin Precipice were my highlights. But even though they're still not great, they're not Apex Predator kind of up there tier. So yeah, this season's weapons have been a bit quite bland, at least compared to last season. For me, anyway.
We did have some good flavorless weapons, though. I did want to shout out Return of Loaded Question. Yep. Randy's throwing knife is back with a big perk pool. I mean, those were both I actually played some Crucible because I wanted a Randy's throwing knife with kinetic tremors, and I just enjoy that archetype of scout rifle. It's in a pretty good spot, as far as the Sandbox goes. It's a very, for me, it's a nostalgic weapon, and then the same could be said for Loaded Question. And then kind of just a weird outlier was the Apocalypse Integration, the hand cannon from the Neomuna Veil, or kind of original beginning of the Veil quest, which has not really gotten a ton of usage this season, but it's got incandescent, it's got harmonic resonance, that raid origin trait, as well as nanotech, and then it has keep away and stats for all as kind of your other picks there. So those were kind of weird because they were outliers, but still strong. And then same for World Drop. This is I know this is a pretty niche one, but that Glissando 47 could roll with no distractions in box breathing, which is a very strong one for PvP. And then it also had, I think it's Overflow or Reconstruction, and
both.
Hatchling was the one I kept for PvP. Yeah, I can't remember which, but it had good reload perk and Hatchling for PvE, which, for a World Drop weapon just kind of floating up in here, pretty good, feels fun to use. And in Hatchling, those Threadlings getting super pumped up could be, strong add clear weapon.
Yep.
All right. Well, speaking about Threadling, we do have some great perks as well. I think one big highlight from me. So we've got, at least in Season 21, we had Bipod, Collective Action, Controlled Burst, Discord, Eddy Current, Invisible Hand, and then for the origin traits, we had Disaster Plan, which was the Reckoning, Unsated Hunger, which was the Taken Weapons, Explosive Pact, which were the Last Wish redos, and the Restoration Ritual for the Ghosts of the Deep dungeon. So yeah, I think for me, and especially in Season 22, when I'm running Foe Tracer, Collective Action is going to be a very sought after perk, and to be honest, we were recommending that for pretty much every perk, every weapon this season. And yeah, Collective Action's my big highlight here. Restoration Ritual, in terms of origin traits, very interesting combination. You've only got 4 weapons to put that on for at least for an origin trait, but comparing that with the Cold Comfort makes it very unique. Being able to res or finish a combatant just to get that emergency reload, very interesting traits. Any highlights here, lads? Impetus, what are you vibing?
Controlled Burst was a welcome surprise. I mean, I think when we had Chris and Rodney on, he was talking about Bipod. We knew that there was going to be a new rocket launcher perk coming out this season, so I think we were all focused on that. But then to have a new damage fusion rifle perk come out was nice as well. I really do love that they threw that in there, and I think that's probably going to be a route that they'll need to take if they want to keep my interest in the weapon families coming out. We know that there's going to be some new archetypes for various subfamilies, I guess is the Bungie terminology there for some weapon archetypes. So I'm hoping that we keep getting Bipod / Controlled Burst style perks coming out for those things, because that's what gets me to use those subfamilies, those archetypes to begin with. So yeah, loved chasing the Loaded Question with Controlled Burst. hope one day that I have a reason to use bipod, but if I don't, that's okay. Collective action, of course. Yeah, stocks are going up, baby. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Eddy Current, man, I was really excited for this, but I think the stat boosts need to be a little bit higher. It's just not there yet, and the activation cost isn't quite worth it to me. But cool idea, props for trying an elemental perk that doesn't explicitly revolve around damage. So maybe we'll see something similar. I hope that they come back around to that, because that was kind of an interesting option. How about you, Saint? What kind of stood out to you for origin traits and perks here that we got this season?
Yeah, I would definitely say Restoration Ritual was my highlight, just because the new Pacific Epitaph, and I think it was No Survivors is the name of that SMG.
Yep.
I really enjoy using both those weapons. I've got some pretty good rolls in those guys from doing dungeon runs, trying to get a better rocket launcher. Haven't gotten that. Have gotten a good wave frame and SMGs, so I'll take it. And the explosive pad from Last Wish, fine. The other two from Reckoning and the Taken weapons, just not. Those two just didn't quite do it for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that contributed to the overall set not feeling great. But I don't think, it was a huge con. Just like not the best origin trait combined with some of the not the best weapons made it, kind of leads to the result that we were talking about him feeling. Eddy Current, I saved a combined action with Eddy Current and Volt Shot because I really have a desire for that to be good, because you read the description and you're like, oh yeah, a perk that works with my, kind of sprinting being amplified and a Volt Shot. But I wish that Eddy Current had a more of an interaction with actually being amplified. Like, imagine if being amplified or having speed booster active increased your reload speed. And I think that would be a really interesting way, kind of to Court's point of like, oh, elemental perks, but it's not actually a damage perk, and I would really love to see that in the future. But current state, not the best. And Control Burst, just kind of nice surprise. Invisible Hand, I think, was pretty much a miss. I don't think that's really going to find a place outside of some cheesy Crucible loadouts where you spray to get its benefits and then try to attack a target, but strange. Really happy to see Bipod get a buff and find its place. Yeah.
I think Eddy Current could be the next candidate for getting a buff. I think it's fertile ground. Very very open-ended in terms of what they could do with it. So I sincerely hope they give that a little kind of touch up. All right, so we've got some exotic gear. We've got weapons and armor, of course. So over on the weapons side, we had Centrifuge, which was the Arc Auto. That was a seasonal weapon from the season pass. We've got the Navigator, which is the Strand Trace from Ghosts of the Deep Dungeon. We've got Wicked Implement, which is from the Whetstone Exotic Mission. That's the Stasis Scout, getting that lovely buff next season. And of course, we got a new Catalyst, and that was Malfeasance. That got Vorpal. Over on the armor side, for Hunters, Triton Vice. For Titans, Arbor Warden. And for Warlocks, Cenotaph Mask. So I'll kick us off here. Some really great exotics there. I've been using Centrifuge. It is a pretty much like you either love it or you hate it kind of auto rifle. I think Saint, you'll probably have some thoughts in a second here. I really love Navigator. It's obviously getting a little bit of a buff next season with the Sever. That was it. The Sever Birth and Wicked Implement, of course. I think next season's updates will be welcomed, very, very welcomed in my on my some of the stasis builds that I'm kind of cooking up in the background. For Triton Vice, though, initially I was just like, I'm not too sure about this one. But as I started kind of playing around with Edge of Concurrence, and obviously this season's been all about Arc, I have been having a blast. All puns intended there, because Triton Vice obviously has that AoE effect when you kill a combatant with the correct like aligned elemental glaive. I've been using it with Winterbite as well. It's a very interesting combination, getting like up to 6 roaming turrets. I think it's a very interesting exotic. Again, it's on this kind of cusp of, if this is only going to do like glaive stuff, do all the glaive stuff. So I think it could do with like a small buff, but I'm quite happy with Triton Vice. I've been enjoying using it. I did use it on the glaive run that we did on the Grandmaster, and it was doing fine. Yeah, Edge of Concurrence was blasting, and
Took all my kills, man. I only had like 2 little turrets up because I couldn't kill anything to get the dang energy.
I'm sorry. Saint, I'll kick over to you. I did mention Centrifuge. I know you've said something about Centrifuge, how you've not kind of vibed with it. Has anything changed since then?
Yeah, I decided to go back after I finished up the Catalyst, and I think that was what kind of pushed me over the edge of enjoying the weapon more. And it gives it that little bit of static charge, and I really leaned into it using auto-loading Link from the Titan chess piece that, oh my gosh, what is the name of that chess piece that auto-loads your auto rifles?
Oh, Axiom? Doing a little war rig?
Blanking right now. War rig, yes, Axiom War rig. I don't know why I couldn't think of that. Thank you, Impetus. War rig, Centrifuge, and I picked every single artifact mod, which we'll talk about in just a second, but specifically Shock and Awe really just put this thing through the roof. The stocks went up, and I couldn't help but invest. I did come to enjoy Centrifuge in the kind of the later parts of this season here. Still don't have a navigator. Didn't do the dungeon enough, probably. It's just some weeks where I was just not grinding dungeons and stuff like that, so I can't really complain about the RNG too much there. Wicked Implements, seeing its big improvement. Malfeasance got its Catalyst, and it's about to just continue getting better and better with those massive buffs next season. The Titan exotic armor, though, Arbor Warden, is funny. I enjoy using it in like Crucible private matches. I don't talk about this a ton, but the majority of my Crucible playtime this season is in private matches, like before or after raids. We'll sign on, we'll do raid boss checkpoints, or we'll just run through a Last Wish or whatever the featured raid is for a week, and then usually my friends and I will kind of stick around and do Rumble games or 3v3 private matches. And using that when you're on you can deploy a Void Overshield to your teammate that's about to get picked off, or suspend somebody through a barricade. It's really funny, and that's okay. Every exotic doesn't have to be like super new power tier. It can just be unique and exotic and fun to use, and I'm okay with that, even though I'm just a little bit jealous of the boat heads over here and the obscene utility that Warlocks are able to put out with that helmet. Speaking of which, Impetus, exotic thoughts?
I'm excited to see how the best PvE players treat Cenotaph Mask. We've got a raid race coming up very shortly with the reprised raid coming back, so I'm very curious to see how people are going to be using that. I'm not going to be participating in that raid. I'm going to be working, so I'll be watching this time around, and so I'm excited to see what the Warlocks on the teams are running. If it's if there's more than one, if you got somebody on Lunafaction and then do you have somebody else in Cenotaph, but it certainly seems like it's going to be kind of a raid staple for the day one competition, and then also probably for the highest level, the master tier raids. I think this is going to have a really good place, so that is good to see. We love having more options at those true in-game levels there. Centrifuge definitely strikes me as kind of Arc the weapon. You've got some great interaction there with Amplify and then also Arc Blind, which is very strong. So yeah, once that thing gets charged up, you can really go on a tear, and I love that. Navigator definitely is, I don't know if I can quite say it's going to be Strand the weapon, but it's getting up there for what it provides, at least. It is definitely probably one of the best trace rifles. I guess you can make a case for a few of them, but the exotic trace rifles are definitely top tier right now, and there's a lot of great options there, so I like to see that. Malfeasance, I mean, Vorpal Weapon made a ton of sense, so I got no notes there. Like, yeah, I'll slap it on there. Let's go to town. Wicked Implement, again, do the Catalyst, but definitely seems like it's going to be a really strong option. It's great to have an exotic Stasis Scout that really does lean into that slow in a not obnoxious way for our PvP folks. So, yeah, I mean, this side, of course, the exotic gear side, this feels like a really good season for me. It was more, I think the legendary side was a bit of a letdown, but yeah, I mean, this has been a really great one to kind of play around with the options there, and I'm excited to see how these fare for the future, for the time being. Moving over to the artifact here before we get into Ghost of the Deep and the Whetstone exotic mission here. Anything that you guys want to talk about? Any highlighted stuff that really, I know Saint definitely wants to talk about the arc options. I definitely loved the Void trifecta of getting the Onto the Breach, Protective Breach, and Supernova. That felt like a lot of fun. That's what I was using in the GM, our new GM. That's actually, yeah, I did Controverse. I'm trying to remember what the build was, but that's what I had. I had all three of those. I was getting Void over shields. The Void breaches were raining down on me, which as a Void Warlock was hard to do outside of the season. So it was nice to get to play around with that aspect a little bit easier this season around. And yeah, it felt great having all that sweet synergy there. Didn't get to play around too much with Shock and Awe. This time around, I was, didn't get to do as much arc, but Saint, how are these feeling? Was it a good season for the punch?
It was a good season to be punching. I really like the arc. Definitely stole the show for me because of stuff like Electric Armorer, amped up Thunderous Retort. You're dealing that extra, I think it was 20% with a Thunder Crash, so you could really just double down into that kind of fantasy of big burst damage, and at the same time you're gaining damage resistance, using trace rifles to just see enemies chain react and explode everywhere from Shock and Awe or even Forbearance, because we've been talking about how Forbearance could really just use a little bit of an uplift, and I think this was the perfect thing for that. The Void Trifecta was really fun, and I enjoyed the way that it worked with Offensive Bulwark, but I didn't play it a ton, I think because I just played that so much in the prior season. I just played nothing but Void Titan pretty much in the season prior, so I really played a lot more Strand, and using Strand Soldier with some weapon like Quicksilver was incredibly fun and worked really well with the Titan build, and I'm glad I capitalized on that. But yeah, it was pretty much Strand or Arc for me this season, and Strand Soldier was a lot of fun, getting those Unravel rounds, just procking off like Cord was talking about, just effects flying everywhere. Wishing that I had gotten the Navigator to take advantage of that a little bit more, looking back on it, but Quicksilver is still a great weapon, really fun weapon to use. And I did use squad goals a bit. When I was playing on Strand a lot, I would use squad goals because I didn't super value any of the final column ones. Versus Arc, you definitely wanted, Thunderous Retort, or I think it was Lightning Strikes twice, were both in the final column. But yeah, using squad goals and giving people Woven Mail was pretty effective whenever you're going in for the finishers.
Yeah, Void Trifecta were like the warming act, like kind of warms up the audience, but then you've got the 5-person band coming on and just completely steals the show, and that was the arc mods. I would have loved to have used more of the Void Trifecta, but those those artifact mods were just something else. Like just being able to pair everything together, it was such a sweet spot. Never actually used many of the champion pair. I think I only really use Barrier Auto because it's a little bit unreliable trying to rely on. I wasn't really using Solar this season for obvious reasons, but volatile rounds can be a bit difficult if you're not on a hunter, and unravel rounds is pretty difficult. And there's only 2 ways to get unravel rounds, and one of which was the season's Strand Soldier, which I did use quite a lot. I think at the start of the season, I kind of highlighted squad goals as a potential, this might really steal the show here, but I never really used it a lot. I think it just required a little bit more, communication with your team, like, oh, can you go an arc subclass, I'll go Void for the Devourer, and someone else can go Strand for the Woven Males. You just need a lot of kind of crisscross to make it work. I think if we didn't have such a if squad goals was a mod for this season coming up in season 22, I think I would be more inclined to use it a lot more. But I was just using like Shock and Awe or Supernova over squad goals, unfortunately. But yeah, such a great arc season for season 21. Okay, so we've got two last kind of segments here before we wrap things up. We've got Ghost of the Deep, and then we've got the Whetstone as the exotic mission. So we'll kick things off with the dungeon. So how are we vibing with the loot, the mechanics, and of course our kind of general impressions for the dungeon? I'll kick us off. The loot, I think, again, it's been another kind of hit or miss depending on how you're kind of vibing with that. I think all four of the weapons are great. Yes, you do need to buy into the dungeon. They're maybe not the best dungeon weapons that we've had, but Cold Comfort I've really grown attached to with the multiple perk pulls I've got. I really like Greasy Luck. Getting that. What role did I get? Yeah, close to melee and Disruption Break, and how Disruption Break does apply to the melee. So if you've got any combatants with a shield, strip that, and that's a 50% kinetic damage buff for your other weapons. What else are we thinking? Plus the glaive itself, which counts as kinetic melee for some reason. The SMG haven't used a lot. I think that's maybe my kind of least use of the dungeon weapons, but again, it's not necessarily a bad weapon. And then, of course, the grenade launcher, I've been getting a lot of rolls. I think Collective Action's kind of my go-to, but I do have an AJ and demo grenade launcher roll as well. Set the top of the episode here, I did do my solo flawless run. I've done quite a few runs. Definitely one of the kind of upper tier dungeons. I really love the thematics. I love the whole kind of story and narrative behind orcs. It somehow managed to fall out of orbit of Saturn and land on Titan, and then managed to get to the bottom of the methane sea, and he's there. Getting resurrected. Love that vibe. Would have loved to have seen him as a light bearer. Just orcs coming back really pissed off. Yeah, I think just really a top tier dungeon. It's kind of up there with me, with say Duality. Duality is a solid dungeon. Prophecy, and even Grasp of Avarice. It's kind of really maybe upper A tier for me when it just kind of general vibes for the dungeon. Mechanic wise, it's certainly a lot more. It's not as complicated as say Duality, where there was a lot of kind of moving parts which caused some problems. We had a lot of bugs when it came to Duality, teleporting between the realms, but a lot more cleaner dungeon experience. I think they did learn from that experience, the sort of Duality problems. The only problem, or the two big problems I have when I was, doing the solo flawless, but it's kind of comparable and relatable to doing group completions, is the in between the first and the second encounter. It's a lot. There's just like 30 minutes of traversing, which I'm not a big fan of. Like, I just want to get to the next encounter. It's just a lot of slow moving parts, like trying to go through the ocean, kind of the water mechanics was just such a slog. And then the other thing was that, these bosses have a huge amount of HP, and it was very noticeable as a solo. And I really hope in the future that they do fireteam based kind of HP scaling that we see with the legendary campaign modes. I got nothing against the ads, nothing against the actual mechanics of these dungeons, especially this one, I'm not asking for the dungeon to be dumbed down. I'm just asking for, these HPs are so massive for a solo player to sit there for almost, I did that run in about 2 hours, but I think I had to prepare an hour beforehand trying to get everything together. It's just such a slog, such a marathon. That's what kind of kills it for me for solo runs. But yeah, overall, great dungeon. Impetus, what's your vibes here?
Loot felt pretty good. Felt in game. I would say what I would expect from this kind of activity. Yeah, I haven't done this solo. That's still something on my bucket list. But I think mechanics wise, I'm with it right up until the boss fight. I think there's a lot going on in the boss fight, and it feels great to do in a fire team. I'm curious to see whether or not it feels overwhelming. I think the fact that you can kind of step into those water areas to catch a breath before going back in to face the enemies and deal with the boss is a nice touch. But yeah, this feels the most raid-like. At least the final encounter feels the most raid-like of any dungeon encounter, and that, again, that's fine. But I think for solo players, that's going to be kind of rough to do for sure. Overall, though, this is my favorite environment of any dungeon. Definitely, probably my top three environments of all time. I just love the progression from the arcology, which is a really unique space in Destiny, and then going down into the Hive Tomb ship underwater is really, really cool. And then, of course, ending up with Oryx's corpse there is I love the progression of that. I love hearing Xivu Arath talk. Getting the different memory fragments for her and just listening to her lose her mind was a really cool experience. All credit to the voice actress for that performance. That was truly phenomenal. We really got to see her a lot this season, really get introduced to Xivu, hear her in her own voice, and I thought that was done quite well in the dungeon, more so than I thought even in the season. So yeah, definitely love the vibes of Ghosts of the Deep. I think the name is quite fitting. Really great dungeon. Not a lot of things I can hate about it. How about you, Saint?
Yeah, I'm just not super interested in the underwater traversal, kind of like Court was getting at. It's unsettling, and it just takes forever, and you can't mantle, and I don't like any of those things. Outside of that, it's
Did you by
content.
chance get downed when you were in the water and you couldn't traverse? Is that why you're
No,
not
that's completely unrelated. If that failed a solo flawless run for me, or didn't fail a solo flawless run for me.
Right,
Who's to say,
right.
really? Who fell off what cliff, when, it's all up in the air. But yeah, the first time I was like swimming around in one of the traversal sections, and I see Asa just like swim by way out in the edge of the water, and it's all really dark and creepy. I just that heebed my freaking jeebies, man, and I was uncomfy. But hats off to them for like creating a creepy environment, and like the hearing Xivu Arath like freak out in those clips was just seriously good content. Really, just to double down on what Impetus is saying, all the credit to the actor there. Incredibly good work, and really stuck with me more than almost anything else in the dungeon. And yeah, it took me a long time. I still don't have a rocket launcher that is worth keeping, which is a bummer to me. But I do have a great SMG and GL, which I do enjoy. So definitely a good set. Just wish I could target farm that rocket launcher a little bit more. I don't know what else to say about that. Really, really good dungeon. Prophecy is probably still my number one, but I would definitely put this up there. Give it an A+ rating. All right, the last thing that we have to cover here for this season is our exotic mission, the Whetstone. Let's talk a little bit about this. This is something that I've seen. I saw a couple people get kind of mad that this was like linked into a seasonal activity, and that they were trying to matchmake with people to get this done randomly. I I don't really have a ton of empathy for that because I feel that exotic missions should be a challenge and should be tense, and expecting to just go in there with a randomly match-made team and deep dive and to kill this tormentor is just not a realistic expectation. And I get that not having a team can be frustrating and that not everybody has, whatever co-host that they can just ping and run a mission any night of the week, right? But not everybody has a team that they can just pick up whenever they feel like running a mission like this. But you should expect to need to go to LFG and to talk to some people for more challenging missions. Overall, I really enjoy this mission. Court, how you feeling? What are the vibes for Whetstone?
So it's interesting you mentioned that actually about I also kind of share that same vibe where it's like, yeah, of course this should be difficult. It's an exotic mission. Like when at the start of last year with Witch Queen with the Vox Obscura, that thing was pretty nuts to go through on your first time. Of course it should be. But I the reason why I'm kind of curious, thinking that I feel like this mission was obviously made for the season, but I was wondering if the LFG was supposed to launch alongside, because it feels like let's utilize this type of mission with the new looking for group, the new in-game Fireteam Finder. Maybe it's just I'm thinking outside the box here. We know Fireteam Finder's coming at the end of the year for Destiny 2, but they did say, we might have this up kind of after Lightfall's release. So yeah, I feel like this mission maybe would have had a lot more great reception if it did launch alongside Fireteam Finder, because it does feel like it's kind of almost like a tutorializing that kind of, this is more of a higher end content. Use Fireteam Finder if you want to get this done. But yeah, I absolutely agree that this. I think the problem with it being attached to the seasonal content is, at least in the first couple of weeks, a lot of people wanted to do the Whetstone. They were going in as a duo or they're going as a solo, hoping that the fire team would want to go that. But some people, including myself, once I had done the Whetstone, I was like, okay, I just want to do deep dives. I was forced to go into that. That was the problem I had. It was the inverse of what people were kind of talking about. I'm curious how they'll do it when we get this next year as part of the exotic mission rotator, how they're going to kind of extract it from the activity. I'm assuming it's just going to be the first two levels of the deep dive, and then it will go straight into the Whetstone encounter. In terms of how I vibe with it, great. I love it. It's a really solid type of content. I think, like we always talk about raids and dungeons, they are the big kind of peak Destiny experience, but I think exotic missions are also starting to creep into this territory, which is great. I love to like two types of content joined by a third kind of, it's not quite a dungeon, it's a mini type of dungeon. It's got kind of little bits of mechanics from Dungeons and Raids, but it's not quite that. But I'm absolutely loving like their renewed interest into these exotic missions. So it is a tough fight if you're not prepared. Like, go in there with your debuffs and your wells, and or maybe not actually well, because you can get booted out of that. The well can get destroyed pretty easy, but get those damage stacking and stuff. But it's a great experience, great, a lot of fun. I love the darkness pyramid tech. I know Impetus, you were talking to Kit on the last episode of DMB a while back, and just kind of getting that vibe of all that kind of the environment and that particular tech, and I completely echo that feeling of, this is just such a great environment, and what does all this mean? Yeah, great exotic mission. Impetus, take away.
Yeah, my only issue is really that this is the one mission that you need to basically complete with a fire team. I do like trying to solo flawless all the exotic missions kind of in the season they come out, or the year that they come out, if I just forget about it. This is not going to be one that I'm going to attempt to solo flawless. I think it's going to be a really tight solo flawless. I know that some people have done that, but it's clearly not designed for that. And so in that case, I'm not really interested in trying to bash my head against the wall to do something that was designed for group solo. There's a few other things where I would make an exception, but this is not going to be one of them. My issue is really just I needed to do deep dives after I got the weapon and its catalyst unlocked for a seasonal challenge, and every time I match made, people wanted to go do the exotic mission. I even went on to the Destiny app and was looking for a group of people trying to do regular deep dives that were not involving the exotic mission, and I couldn't find somebody, so that was annoying. This will be really interesting to see if this gets added to the exotic mission rotator. I can't imagine having a legendary version of this. It does not strike me as a mission that needs to be made harder, especially when the catalyst is already out. Like, I can't imagine them making it craftable after it came out initially when we have craftable exotics, but it's a fixed role. So I don't know if this is going to qualify for the rotator or not, but I had a great time playing it. It's a fun challenge for sure. Great impressions. Like, I do love the atmosphere so much. I love getting to hear the design process for that, especially the boss room, as Kit was describing it. But all in all, they took a lot of risks. They changed up a lot of the formula that we've come to expect with exotic missions, and I applaud that. I don't know how I would rank it compared to other exotic missions, but I don't have like truly terrible things to say other than the way it was implemented into the seasonal activity, which I just didn't care for. All right, folks, any final thoughts before we end our very long episode, our look back?
I think just overall, really quick thought here. I think I'm loving the direction that the actual folks who are making gameplay content, deep dives, the dungeons. We're obviously getting this normal rotation of a new raid, then a reprised raid, then we've got the 2 dungeons a year. We've got exotic missions seem to be getting a really big kind of spike as well. But I'm really loving that direction, but the narrative could certainly leave a lot to be desired, is my kind of overview. Halfway through this annual content.
Saint? Yeah, I mean, same, I did enjoy it, but it feels just strange. It just feels a little out of place at times, like with the veil containment stuff. Felt kind of like some patchwork, but at least there is an attempt to like be driving the story forward in a meaningful way, and this next season just really make or break for the franchise, dude. I just think at this point. No, I mean, I don't know.
I can't believe you said that.
Way to end it on a high note, dude. Wow, really nailed it.
Yeah, I'm excited for the showcase. I think the Cole's about to start getting shoveled into evil old hype train real soon, and things will be perking back up.
I hope so. Yeah, I'm definitely excited for the showcase. It happened that we did not play a lot of Destiny this past season, but that was, I think, due to reasons kind of outside of Bungie's control. We just had other games to play, and when you have people to play those other games, you want to go and try them out. And that's not on. I don't think that's a fair criticism of the season necessarily. Like, I wouldn't say this is one of the worst seasons of content that they've put out. Like, I can definitely name quite a few other seasons that I would rank lower than Season of the Deep, but I just did not. I mean, this is my least played season, so yeah. But I'm still excited for the future, and I am excited to see the showcase. I'm excited for Season 22. Excited for the changes that are coming in Season 22. It does seem interesting, but yeah, this is not a great first half to the year, I think, is kind of my thoughts on it. And I don't know if you guys feel differently about it or not, but I think I wish I could have enjoyed these first 2 seasons of Lightfall a little bit more. All right, well, now on that super duper low note, I think that will wrap up episode 74 of Podcast versus Enemies. Thank you so much for listening. Goodness sakes, this is a long one. We do absolutely want to thank our audio engineer, Autodidaktos, for hopefully not running away once he gets these files in his folder, and for also helping us sound crisp and fresh each and every episode. The next time you hear from us, there will be lots of Final Shape to talk about, lots of new Destiny 2 play, and most importantly, lots of PvE to break down. So with that being said, my name is Impetus. You can find me by that name in Discord and in Destiny. I no longer have a Twitter account. I did finally delete that app, so it is truly just Discord if you want to reach out and get a hold of me. Yeah. Court, where can we find you?
You can find me on various social media websites as Court Projects. You can find me on Discord. That's probably the best place to reach out to me, whether it's related to PvE or any other kind of content that I produce as Court Projects as well. You can find the content I produce and various other applications and spreadsheets and infographics to enhance your Destiny experience over on DestinyMassiveBreakdowns.com. Saint, where can we find you?
Yep. My name is Saint Kabr. You can find me over on Twitter and Blue Sky, hanging out in that Massive Breakdowns Discord server at Saint Kabr. Until next week, thanks for listening to another episode of PvE.